What if you could hold a piece of history in your hands, not just any fragment, but one of the world's great lost treasures, an object so magnificent and mysterious that it's been whispered about for centuries? Imagine unearthing a legendary artifact mentioned only in scrolls, inscriptions, or sacred texts, something that drove kings to madness, inspired epic quests, and sent explorers across deserts and oceans in search of glory. For as long as humans have recorded their stories, we've also recorded what we've lost: the breathtaking riches, sacred relics, and technological marvels that vanished from history, leaving behind only cryptic clues and tantalizing hints. These aren't just stories, they're invitations into the greatest treasure hunt of all time, one that spans cultures, continents, and millennia. Today, we're setting out on a journey to explore 25 of these legendary lost treasures, each one mentioned in ancient texts, each one shrouded in mystery, and each one holding the power to ignite our sense of wonder. From the gold-laden cities described by Herodotus to the sacred objects named in religious scriptures, these elusive artifacts have captivated historians, adventurers, and dreamers alike. Think about it, hidden somewhere beneath the sands of time could be fabled hoards like the treasure of the Nibelungs, the lost mine of King Solomon, or the Library of Alexandria's priceless scrolls. These aren't mere myths, they're historical puzzles waiting to be solved, each with its own story of creation, disappearance, and the endless human drive to reclaim what was lost. This is more than a list, it's an exploration of our deepest curiosities and boldest ambitions. You'll discover how ancient accounts, whether etched on clay tablets or inked on papyrus, have fueled real-life expeditions, controversies, and even modern-day archaeological missions. We'll traverse through sunken cities, sealed tombs, and encrypted maps, guided by the words of those who lived millennia ago. So settle in and open your mind to the possibilities, because by the end of this journey, you won't just learn about history's greatest missing treasures, you'll feel the thrill of the hunt and the awe of standing at the edge of the unknown. Let's begin. Our journey begins with perhaps the most famous and spiritually charged lost relic in all of human history, the Ark of the Covenant. Described in the book of Exodus, this was no ordinary chest. It was a divine masterpiece, meticulously crafted from acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold inside and out. Atop it sat two magnificent golden cherubim, their wings outstretched and overshadowing the mercy seat, the very throne of God. Within its hallowed confines, it was said to hold the two stone tablets inscribed by the finger of God, the 10 Commandments themselves, along with Aaron's rod that budded and a pot of heavenly manna. But the Ark was far more than a sacred container. It was a weapon and a guide. Ancient texts recount its power to part the Jordan River for the Israelites, topple the walls of Jericho, and even strike down those who dared to touch it improperly, radiating a divine energy that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. For centuries, the Ark resided in the heart of Jerusalem, within Solomon's magnificent temple, the focal point of worship and the symbol of God's covenant with his people. But then, it simply vanished from the historical record. The most accepted theory points to the catastrophic Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem in 586 BC. When King Nebuchadnezzar's armies sacked the city, they looted the temple's vast treasures and burned the sacred complex to the ground. The biblical book of 2nd Maccabees suggests the prophet Jeremiah, forewarned of the invasion, secretly hid the Ark in a cave on Mount Nebo, ensuring it would not fall into pagan hands. Yet, its absence from the detailed inventory of plunder taken to Babylon has fueled endless speculation that it escaped destruction, sparking a quest that has lasted for millennia. This disappearance has given rise to some of history's most captivating and persistent theories. One prominent claim comes from Ethiopia, where the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church asserts the Ark has been safeguarded for centuries in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Axum. They believe it was brought there by Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Then there are the tantalizing rumors of it being concealed in a labyrinth of tunnels deep beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, perhaps hidden away centuries before the Babylonians ever arrived. Other theories range from it being taken to Egypt to being discovered by the Knights Templar during the Crusades and whisked away to Europe, or even resting at the bottom of the Nile River. Despite modern expeditions, sophisticated technology, and relentless searching, the Ark remains elusive, its fate one of the Bible's greatest and most enduring mysteries. From the spiritual mystery of a lost religious relic, we now turn to a tragedy of a different kind, the catastrophic loss of human knowledge with the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. If the Ark of the Covenant represents a singular divine mystery, the library represents a historical void, the crushing absence of an entire world's collective wisdom. Founded in the 3rd century BC in the thriving Egyptian port city of Alexandria, this wasn't merely a library, it was the intellectual heart of the ancient world, the closest thing antiquity ever had to the internet. Its ambitious mission, supported by the Ptolemaic kings, was nothing less than to collect a copy of every known book in the world. Scholars estimate its holdings may have eventually grown to include over 500,000 papyrus scrolls, an unimaginable treasury of literature, science, history, and philosophy. Within its halls, you could have found the original manuscripts of geniuses whose names still define Western thought. The complete works of the playwright Sophocles, who wrote over 120 plays. Today, we have only 7, the entire writings of Aristotle, the father of logic and biology, whose lost dialogues were said to be even more brilliant than the ones that survived. The works of the historian Herodotus, potentially containing volumes of stories and cultures that have since vanished from memory. It likely housed detailed maps of unexplored lands, astronomical charts of forgotten constellations, and medical texts with remedies and knowledge that would take centuries to rediscover. This was the sum total of human inquiry up to that point, all housed under one roof, a beacon of learning that attracted the greatest minds of the era to study, debate, and advance the boundaries of knowledge. The story of its destruction is not a single event but a series of devastating blows spread across centuries, each one chipping away at this great edifice of learning. The first major incident occurred in 48 BC during Julius Caesar's Alexandrian War. Besieged in the harbor, Caesar's forces set fire to the Egyptian fleet, and the flames are said to have spread to the parts of the city where scrolls were stored, consuming a vast number of them. Centuries later, the library suffered further under Roman Emperor Aurelian's campaigns, and then again during a purge ordered by the Christian Emperor Theodosius in 391 AD, who targeted pagan institutions. The final, often cited blow came with the Muslim conquest of Alexandria in 642 AD, though many modern scholars debate the severity of this event. The truth is, the library likely suffered a long, slow death from neglect, budget cuts, and periodic violence rather than one single catastrophic fire, a gradual dimming of the great light of the ancient world. The ongoing scholarly debate isn't just about how it was destroyed, but what its loss truly cost humanity. What secrets died with those scrolls? We lost the entire history of the Carthaginians, written by their own hands, leaving their story to be told solely by their Roman conquerors. How much further would science be today if the works of the great Greek inventors like Archimedes and Hero of Alexandria had been preserved in full and built upon, rather than being lost and having to be reinvented a millennium later? The Library of Alexandria stands as a permanent reminder of the fragility of knowledge, a cautionary tale that every age must vigilantly protect its cultural and intellectual heritage, for once it is gone, it may be lost for all time. Leaving behind the silent echoes of lost knowledge in Alexandria, we journey now to the vast, windswept steppes of Mongolia in search of a different kind of treasure, one not made of gold or jewels, but of immense historical significance, hidden with a secrecy so absolute it has defied discovery for centuries. This is the final resting place of one of history's most formidable and influential figures, Genghis Khan, the founder of the Mongol Empire, which became the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever known, was not just a conqueror but a statesman whose legacy shaped global history. Yet, for all his world-altering power, his greatest wish was to vanish without a trace. According to the account of the Persian historian Malik Juvayni, written just decades after the Khan's death in 1227, his final command was that his burial site should remain unknown. To achieve this, his inner circle executed a funerary plan of breathtaking ruthlessness and ingenuity. The ancient texts describe a procession of loyal soldiers escorting the Khan's body back to his homeland, a place he had chosen for its personal significance, possibly near the sacred mountain of Burkhan Khaldun. The legend states that to forever conceal the path they took, these soldiers diverted an entire river to flow over the tomb, creating a permanent watery seal. Another account, even more chilling, suggests that after the interment, the entire funeral escort, soldiers, slaves, and attendants alike, were massacred by a separate army of warriors who had been waiting at a distance. This second group, in turn, were said to have been killed upon their return to camp, ensuring that no single living soul could ever betray the location. Finally, to erase the last visual evidence, 1,000 horses were allegedly driven back and forth across the ground, trampling any sign of disturbance until the landscape returned to its pristine, untampered state. The earth itself was sworn to silence. For 800 years, this secrecy has held firm, making the tomb of Genghis Khan the holy grail of Mongolian archaeology. The potential significance of its discovery cannot be overstated. Unlike the looted pyramids of Egypt, this tomb, hidden and protected by its own mythos, could be completely intact. It might contain not just the remains of the great Khan himself, but an unparalleled time capsule of the early Mongol Empire artifacts, weapons, and treasures that would offer an unfiltered window into the culture that reshaped the world. The search, however, is fraught with immense challenges, both technical and cultural. The permitted search area is phenomenally vast, covering thousands of square miles of remote and rugged terrain. Furthermore, many Mongolians view the quest with deep suspicion, believing that disturbing the grave would awaken a terrible curse and desecrate a sacred site, a belief that adds a powerful cultural barrier to the physical ones. Despite these obstacles, the modern hunt for the tomb has employed some of the most advanced technology available. The Valley of the Khans project, led by archaeologist Dr. Albert Yu Min Lin, utilized non-invasive techniques in an attempt to honor cultural sensitivities. They analyzed high-resolution satellite imagery, looking for subtle geographical anomalies that could indicate human construction hidden beneath the surface. They then sent teams into the field with ground-penetrating radar and drones, creating a digital map of the subsurface without ever putting a shovel in the earth. While the project identified numerous promising sites, including a significant archaeological complex, the definitive, unequivocal tomb of the emperor remains elusive. The enduring mystery of Genghis Khan's grave is a powerful testament to the success of his final command, a secret kept not by a lock and key, but by the very land he ruled and the enduring respect and fear of his descendants. Our journey now takes a dramatic turn, from the windswept plains of Mongolia to the opulent palaces of 18th century Europe, in pursuit of a treasure so dazzling it was nicknamed the eighth wonder of the world. The Amber Room was far more than a mere chamber. It was a masterpiece of Baroque art, a symphony in amber. Conceived in Prussia and constructed over a decade, the room was a breathtaking collaboration between German and Danish craftsmen for King Frederick William I. Imagine walls paneled with over 6 tons of the finest honey-colored amber, a material more valuable than gold at the time. These intricate mosaics were inlaid with exquisite Florentine stone, accented with vast quantities of gold leaf, and framed by a series of towering, gilt-framed mirrors designed to reflect the warm, glowing stone and the flicker of countless candles, creating an almost magical, infinitely expanding space of pure radiance. In a shrewd diplomatic move in 1716, the Prussian king gifted this unparalleled marvel to Russia's Peter the Great, solidifying an alliance against Sweden. The amber panels were carefully crated and sent to the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, and decades later, Empress Elizabeth had them moved to the Catherine Palace in Tsarskoye Selo, where Italian designer Bartolomeo Francesco Rastrelli masterfully expanded the room, adding more amber, mosaics, and gilding to fit its new, grander home. For nearly 2 centuries, it stood as the crown jewel of the Russian imperial family, a stunning testament to artistic genius and the immense wealth of the Tsars, astonishing every visitor who was granted a viewing. This all came to a horrifying end with the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. As German forces advanced on Leningrad, curators at the Catherine Palace desperately tried to dismantle the Amber Room. They quickly discovered the panels were too fragile. The century-old amber had dried out and begun to crumble. In a heartbreaking decision, they attempted to hide its grandeur by covering the walls with thin wallpaper and ordinary curtains, a futile effort to disguise one of the world's most recognizable treasures. The ruse failed. The Nazis, who had long coveted the room as a piece of what they considered Germanic cultural heritage, methodically disassembled it in just 36 hours, packed the panels into 27 crates, and shipped them to Königsberg Castle in East Prussia, present-day Kaliningrad, Russia. There, the room was reassembled and put on display for a brief period, its beauty now a trophy of war. Then, in 1945, as the Red Army closed in on Königsberg and Allied bombing raids reduced the city to rubble, the Amber Room vanished from history. This disappearance ignited one of the 20th century's most intense and enduring treasure hunts. The most widely accepted theory for decades was that the room was utterly destroyed when Königsberg Castle was heavily damaged by British bombers and then by the final Soviet assault. However, the absence of any significant amber fragments in the castle's ruins has kept other, more tantalizing theories alive. Many believe the crates were never in the castle at all, but were instead hidden in a secret network of tunnels, mines, or bunkers in the final, chaotic days of the war. Potential locations range from abandoned salt mines in Saxony to a lagoon in Poland, or even a hidden chamber beneath the city of Königsberg itself. Countless expeditions have been launched, some funded by governments and others by private treasure hunters, all following leads that range from the credible to the wildly fantastical. They have chased everything from decoy shipments and cryptic diaries to smugglers' maps and deathbed confessions. In a remarkable turn of events, a dedicated team of German and Russian craftsmen completed a meticulous 24-year-long reconstruction of the Amber Room using original techniques and old black and white photographs. This magnificent replica now stands in the Catherine Palace, allowing the public to once again experience its awe-inspiring beauty. Yet, the fate of the original 6 tons of priceless amber, gold, and history remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of World War II, a ghost of glittering splendor lost to the shadows of conflict. Shifting our focus from the man-made marvel lost to war in Europe, we venture next into the heart of the Andes, where the story of lost treasure is not one of a single object, but of an entire empire's wealth, systematically plundered and then seemingly swallowed by the earth. The legend of the lost Inca gold begins not with a myth, but with the first-hand, awe-struck accounts of Spanish conquistadors. When Francisco Pizarro and his small band of adventurers arrived in Peru in the 1530s, they stumbled into a world unlike any they could have imagined. They described temples whose walls were plated with solid gold, gardens where life-sized sculptures of corn, llamas, and jaguars were crafted from the purest gold and silver, and a ruling class so rich they ate from golden plates and drank from golden cups. For the Inca, gold was not a currency, it was the sweat of the sun, a sacred metal with spiritual significance. For the Spanish, it was the sole reason for their perilous journey across the ocean. The pivotal moment in this story of unimaginable wealth and tragic loss centers on the last independent Inca emperor, Atahualpa. After capturing him at Cajamarca in 1532, the Spanish offered him a deal that seemed impossible. They would grant him his freedom in exchange for a ransom. The terms were as simple as they were staggering. Atahualpa promised to fill a large room measuring about 22 feet long by 17 feet wide, once with gold and twice with silver, up to a white line as high as a man could reach. This ransom room became the nexus of one of history's greatest treasure flows. For months, llamas trains streamed into Cajamarca from every corner of the empire, carrying a king's ransom in effigies, temple ornaments, plates, and jewelry, priceless cultural and religious artifacts that represented the artistic soul of the Inca civilization. Yet the Spanish conquistadors saw only raw material. Despite receiving the agreed-upon ransom, which historians estimate was worth billions in today's value, Pizarro had no intention of honoring the bargain. He feared releasing Atahualpa would unite the Inca against him. In a final act of betrayal, after the room was filled and the treasure was secured, he had the emperor executed. The vast hoard of artistic masterpieces was then callously melted down into plain, standardized gold bars for easier transport back to Spain. This act was not just theft, it was a cultural holocaust, the deliberate destruction of an entire artistic and religious heritage for its weight in bullion. While most of these bars were successfully shipped, several Spanish galleons laden with Inca gold are said to have sunk in storms, creating other sunken treasure mysteries along the coasts of the Americas. But the story doesn't end with the melted ransom. The legend persists that this was only a fraction of the empire's wealth. As the Spanish noose tightened, Inca generals and priests loyal to Atahualpa are said to have organized a massive evacuation. They diverted a final, even greater convoy of treasure, perhaps containing the solid gold statues from the Temple of the Sun in Cusco, away from the invaders and into the remote, cloud-shrouded mountains and the vast, uncharted Amazon rainforest. This gave birth to the enduring myth of Paititi, the legendary lost city of gold, sometimes called the last refuge of the Inca. For 5 centuries, this tale has drawn explorers and fortune hunters into some of the most dangerous and inaccessible terrain on the planet, from the high Andes to the Amazon basin. The modern quest for this lost Inca gold and the city of Paititi is a blend of high-tech archaeology and old-fashioned jungle exploration. Satellite imagery is used to identify ancient road systems and potential ruins hidden under dense canopy. Expeditions equipped with ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR technology venture into protected areas like the Monu National Park, following clues from colonial-era maps and indigenous oral histories. Some researchers believe Paititi is not a single city but a network of hidden settlements. The search is fraught with peril, involving treacherous rivers, hostile wildlife, and the very real risk of getting lost in an impenetrable wilderness. Every so often, a discovery fuels the fire: a newly uncovered temple complex, a cave containing gold artifacts, or a strange geometric formation spotted from the air. The lost gold of the Inca Empire remains the ultimate prize, a symbol of a magnificent culture's tragic end and the enduring, tantalizing hope that its greatest treasures still lie hidden, waiting to be found. Moving from the sun-drenched empires of the Andes to the misty, intrigue-filled halls of British-ruled Ireland, we encounter a lost treasure wrapped not in ancient myth, but in a very modern scandal of crime, politics, and cover-up. The Irish crown jewels were not ancient relics of a Gaelic kingdom, but a spectacular set of ceremonial regalia created for the newly established Order of St. Patrick in 1783. The centerpiece was a magnificent diamond star and a stunning 5-pointed badge containing 394 brilliantly cut precious stones sourced from the jewelry collection of Queen Charlotte. These weren't just state jewels, they were a potent symbol of British authority in Ireland, worn by the Lord Lieutenant, the King's representative, at grand ceremonies in Dublin Castle. Their value in 1907 was estimated at a then astounding £14,000, equivalent to well over $2 million today. The brazen theft itself reads like a plot from a detective novel. On the morning of July 6, 1907, just days before a much-anticipated visit from King Edward VII, the castle's safe was discovered open and the jewels were gone. The investigation was immediately mired in the very environment that likely enabled the theft in the first place, a culture of shocking negligence and privileged access. The keys to the safe were routinely left in the lock. The door to the strongroom was often left unlocked. A whole host of people, from civil servants to servants themselves, had easy, unmonitored access to the area. It was the perfect crime, not because it was brilliantly planned, but because security was virtually non-existent. What followed the discovery was not a swift resolution, but a political and social firestorm that reached the highest levels of British and Irish society. The investigation quickly became entangled in a web of salacious rumors and homophobic panic. The focus turned to the Office of Arms, the heraldic authority responsible for the jewels, which was run by Sir Arthur Vickers, the Ulster King of Arms. Vickers was known for his heavy drinking and for hosting late-night parties at the castle with a circle of friends that included other aristocrats and military officers. Whispers of homosexual activity within this group, which was illegal at the time, began to dominate the conversation, overshadowing the actual search for the jewels. The scandal was so intense that King Edward VII was said to be furious, declaring he wouldn't set foot in Ireland until the jewels were recovered. The primary suspect, according to Vickers himself, was his own nephew and protege, Francis Shackleton, the brother of the famous Antarctic explorer Ernest Shackleton. Francis was a charming but deeply unreliable character with substantial debts and a dubious reputation. Vickers claimed Shackleton had stolen his keys and had them copied. Another figure, Captain Richard Gorges, was also implicated. He was later involved in a homosexual scandal in London and was said to have confessed to the theft on his deathbed, though this was never substantiated. The official investigation, hampered by a desire to avoid a public trial that would air all the dirty laundry, went nowhere. Vickers was fired in disgrace, becoming the public scapegoat for the entire affair, while Shackleton and others were never formally charged. The case was officially closed in 1908 with no arrests and no jewels recovered. This lack of closure has spawned a century of theories about the fate of the Irish crown jewels. The most practical theory is that they were quickly dismantled, their stones pried from their settings and sold individually on the black market in Amsterdam or London, their magnificent craftsmanship destroyed for quick, untraceable cash. Another persistent rumor suggests they were not stolen for profit, but as an act of political blackmail to prevent the exposure of high-ranking figures in the homosexual scandal, and that they were later secretly returned to the crown under a strict vow of silence, though no evidence supports this. Perhaps the most colorful theory proposes that the jewels were hidden within a Freemason lodge as part of an internal fraternal prank or punishment that went too far, and that they remain there to this day, hidden in plain sight. Despite numerous claims and searches over the decades, including an official dig in the mountains of Wicklow in the 1920s, the trail remains cold. The theft of the Irish crown jewels stands as a perfect, unsolved crime of the Edwardian era, a story where the loss of magnificent treasure is forever intertwined with a far greater loss of reputation, leaving a mystery that continues to tantalize historians and treasure hunters alike. Buried within the same desert caves that preserved the ancient religious texts of the Dead Sea Scrolls lies a mystery of an entirely different nature, one not of spiritual wisdom but of immense tangible wealth. While the other scrolls contain biblical manuscripts and sectarian rules, one stands completely apart, the Copper Scroll, Unlike its fragile companions written on parchment or papyrus, this document was meticulously inscribed on thin sheets of copper, a deliberately durable medium meant to last for millennia. But its material isn't the only thing that sets it apart. The copper scroll isn't a sacred text. It reads like a cryptic treasure map, a detailed inventory of 64 separate caches of hidden bullion and sacred vessels. It lists absolutely staggering quantities, over 4,600 talents of gold and silver, along with hundreds of gold and silver vessels, incense, and precious scrolls. In modern terms, we're talking about tons of precious metal with an estimated value well into the billions of dollars. The language of the scroll is as cryptic as its purpose. It doesn't offer grand historical narratives or religious parables. Instead, it provides terse geographical clues. It describes locations with phrases like, "In the ruin that is in the valley of Achor, under the steps leading to the east 40 long cubits, a chest of silver and its vessels," or "In the cistern of the man of the Beit HaKerem, in the outlet towards the north, 17 talents of silver." These directions assume a contemporary knowledge of the landscape, landmarks, buildings, and water systems that have been lost to 2,000 years of erosion, war, and urban development. Deciphering it isn't just a matter of translation. It's an exercise in historical geography and archaeological deduction, trying to match ancient names to modern locations. This has led to a fierce and fascinating debate among scholars. Is the treasure real? One school of thought argues that the quantities described are so impossibly vast that the scroll must be a work of fiction, perhaps a legend about the treasures of the Second Temple or a piece of folklore. Others propose it could be a record of the wealth of the Essene community itself, the group many believe authored the Dead Sea Scrolls. But the most compelling theory, and the one that fuels most treasure hunters, is that the copper scroll is a genuine inventory of the sacred treasures from the temple in Jerusalem, hidden away to protect them from the plundering Roman legions during the first Jewish revolt around 70 AD. The precise, matter-of-fact instructions, etched so permanently into metal, certainly carry the weight of a genuine emergency plan for safeguarding a nation's most valuable assets. This possibility has ignited a modern treasure hunt that continues to this day. Early expeditions in the 1950s and 60s, led by archaeologists and adventurous priests, followed the scroll's clues with a mix of academic rigor and hopeful desperation. They dug at the base of specific ruins, investigated ancient aqueducts and cisterns around Qumran and Jerusalem, and scanned caves with increasingly sophisticated tools. Some searches even turned up small, tantalizing finds, like a few ancient keys and vessels, but nothing that came close to the mountains of treasure described. The primary challenge beyond the cryptic text is the immense change the landscape has undergone. The Valley of Achor, mentioned in the scroll, for instance, has been definitively identified, but excavating an entire valley based on a direction like under the steps is a monumental, Chinese letter impossible task. The quest has evolved dramatically with technology. Today, teams use satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and three-dimensional mapping software to try and see what lies beneath the soil without a single shovel strike. They cross-reference the scroll's descriptions with historical records from Josephus and other ancient sources, building a digital model of the ancient Judean wilderness. Yet the copper scroll guards its secrets jealously. Perhaps the treasure was discovered and looted centuries ago by Romans or Bedouins who left no record. Perhaps the instructions were a deliberate code, understood only by a select few priests who took the true meaning of the locations to their graves. Or perhaps, just perhaps, billions of dollars in ancient gold and silver still lie buried in the Israeli desert, waiting for the right person to finally solve a 2,000-year-old puzzle. From the shrouded mysteries of the copper scroll, we travel now to the land of the rising sun, where a lost treasure represents not just material value, but the very soul of a nation's warrior spirit. The Honjō Masamune was far more than a weapon. It was a masterpiece of art and engineering, a symbol of authority, and a sacred relic of Japanese history. Its creator, Honjō Masamune, who worked in the late 13th and early 14th centuries, is widely revered as Japan's greatest swordsmith. His techniques were so advanced they bordered on legend, said to produce blades of unparalleled strength, flexibility, and beauty, with a distinctive, mesmerizing grain pattern in the steel known as the Nai-deki finish, resembling a field of stars or tiny particles scattered along the edge of the universe. To hold a Masamune was to hold a piece of perfected nature, a sword that was both deadly and divine. This particular katana earned its name, the Honjō Masamune, from a famed episode in the 16th century. It was wielded by a general named Honjō Shigenaga during a brutal battle. In the heat of combat, an enemy soldier struck Shigenaga's helmet with such force that the blow split the helmet in two, but was miraculously deflected by the sword's superior craftsmanship, saving Shigenaga's life. The blade itself was left with a slight nick, but this imperfection only added to its legend and value, a permanent testament to its resilience. The sword later came into the possession of the Tokugawa family, and for generations it served as a symbol of the shogunate's power, passed down from one shogun to the next. It wasn't merely owned, it was cherished as a national treasure, an heirloom representing the unbroken line of authority and the pinnacle of Japanese cultural achievement. The sword's uninterrupted journey through centuries of Japanese history came to a sudden and shocking end in the aftermath of World War II. As part of the surrender terms imposed by the Allied forces, Japan was required to disarm its civilian population and military. A directive issued in 1945 ordered all citizens to turn in their weapons, including historic and ceremonial blades. For the family that had safeguarded the Honjō Masamune, this was an unimaginable dilemma. The head of the Tokugawa family, Ieyasu Tokugawa, complied with the law, surrendering the priceless katana and numerous other heirlooms to a local police station in December of that year. It was a heartbreaking act, a forced surrender of cultural identity to the conquering power. What happened next is one of the 20th century's most frustrating cultural mysteries. The sword, along with a collection of other surrendered blades, was collected by American soldiers. The items were catalogued and then presumably shipped to a central collection depot. And then the Honjō Masamune simply vanished from all official records. The most widely accepted and tragic theory is that the American servicemen tasked with handling these items, unaware of their profound cultural and historical significance, saw them only as war trophies or mere scrap metal. The swords may have been tossed into piles with common military equipment, and in the chaotic effort to dispose of vast quantities of surrendered material, the Honjō Masamune could have been callously melted down for its raw steel, its centuries of history obliterated in a common furnace. Another persistent theory offers a sliver of hope, suggesting that a soldier, perhaps more knowledgeable or simply lucky, recognized the sword's extraordinary quality and took it home as a personal souvenir. If this is the case, the Honjō Masamune could be sitting in an attic or a display case somewhere in the United States, its true identity unknown to its current owners, who see it only as a curious war memento. Over the decades, numerous searches have been launched by both Japanese officials and private historians. They have followed leads, investigated collections, and pleaded for information, but every potential sighting has turned out to be a different blade or an outright forgery. The loss of the Honjō Masamune is felt deeply in Japan, not as the loss of a valuable object, but as the loss of a national symbol, a direct connection to a revered artisan and a defining era of their history that was severed in the fog of war. Its absence is a permanent reminder of the fragile nature of cultural heritage and the irreversible consequences that can spring from a single moment of historical upheaval. While the Honjō Masamune represents a loss from the modern era, Our next treasure connects us directly to the heart of ancient religious practice and one of history's most infamous acts of plunder. The magnificent menorah from the Second Temple in Jerusalem stands as one of the most iconic and sacred objects ever lost. Described in meticulous detail in the book of Exodus, this was not a simple candelabra. It was a massive, solid gold, 7-branched lampstand, painstakingly hammered from a single talent of pure gold. It served as a central symbol of divine presence and enlightenment for the Jewish people, continuously lit within the temple's holy place. Its light was a beacon of faith and national identity, making its capture not just a military victory for Rome but a profound spiritual catastrophe. The historical record of its theft is chillingly precise. In 70 AD, after a brutal siege, the Roman legions under the future Emperor Titus breached Jerusalem's defenses and ransacked the Second Temple. The event was immortalized on the Arch of Titus, erected in Rome's Forum to celebrate the conquest. The relief carving on the arch shows a triumphant procession, with Roman soldiers carrying the spoils of war on their shoulders. At the center of this depiction is the menorah, unmistakable in its detail, being paraded through the streets of Rome alongside other sacred items like the silver trumpets and the table of showbread. This stone carving is the last confirmed visual evidence of the menorah's existence, a permanent monument to its loss. After its arrival in Rome, the menorah was almost certainly placed within the Temple of Peace, a repository built by Emperor Vespasian to house the most spectacular spoils from Judea. For centuries, it likely remained there as a trophy, a physical manifestation of Rome's power over a conquered people. Its fate becomes murky with the slow decline of the Western Roman Empire. The most pivotal event is the sack of Rome by the Vandals in 455 AD. Under King Genseric, the Vandals looted the city with a thoroughness that shocked the ancient world, and it is widely believed they took the treasures from the Temple of Peace, including the menorah, back to their capital city of Carthage in North Africa. This is where the historical trail splits into a web of intriguing theories. One possibility is that the menorah never left Rome at all. Some scholars suggest it could have been lost or melted down during one of the many sacks or periods of turmoil that rocked the city in the 5th and 6th centuries. A more compelling and persistent theory, however, involves the Byzantine general Belisarius. Around 533 AD, he defeated the Vandals and captured Carthage. According to the historian Procopius, Belisarius recovered the vast Vandal horde, including the treasures of the Jewish temple. In a grand gesture, he sent it all back to Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. The story goes that Emperor Justinian, fearful of possessing what was seen as a cursed trophy that had brought ruin to both Rome and Carthage, ordered the menorah to be returned to Jerusalem. However, there is no record of it ever arriving, leading to speculation that the ship transporting it was lost at sea or that it was diverted and hidden. This has given rise to the most tantalizing theory of all, that the menorah rests at the bottom of the Tiber River in Rome. The legend suggests that as Belisarius's forces approached or during another moment of crisis, the treasures were thrown into the river to prevent them from being captured yet again, sinking into the mud where they remain to this day. Despite numerous searches and even a few modern sonar scans of the riverbed, no definitive evidence has ever been found. The Vatican has consistently denied any knowledge or possession of the artifact, though this has done little to quell speculation. The loss of the menorah is more than the disappearance of a golden object. It represents the dispersal of a people and the destruction of their spiritual center, a wound that has remained open for nearly 2 millennia. Its recovery would be one of the most significant archaeological finds in history, a symbolic restoration of a light thought to have been extinguished forever. Leaving behind the ancient treasures of temples and empires, we plunge into a drama that unfolds in the early 19th century, a tale of revolution, betrayal, and a fortune so immense it would become the holy grail of pirate lore. This is the story of the treasure of Lima, a hoard that represents the accumulated wealth of an entire continent, siphoned into one city for 300 years, only to vanish in a single, desperate act. By 1820, the winds of revolution, fanned by the liberator Simón Bolívar, were sweeping through South America. In the Peruvian city of Lima, the seat of Spanish power, the royalist authorities were gripped by panic. The city's churches, monasteries, and government buildings held a staggering concentration of wealth. Solid gold statues of the Virgin Mary and various saints taller than a man, their gemstone eyes glittering in the candlelight. Two life-sized solid gold statues of the Virgin Mary holding the infant Jesus, encrusted with emeralds, countless jeweled vestments, gold chalices, and 12 massive candlesticks of pure gold, and an immense quantity of minted coins and jeweled weaponry. It was a treasure trove born of conquest, piety, and centuries of mining, now under imminent threat. Fearing the advancing revolutionary armies, the Spanish viceroy, José de la Serna, made a fateful decision. He could not defend the treasure, so he would evacuate it. He entrusted this monumental task to a British merchant sea captain named William Thompson, placing the entire fortune aboard his sturdy merchant ship, the Mary Dear. The plan was to sail the treasure north to the safety of Mexico, still under loyalist Spanish control. It was an act of profound trust, placing what was likely the greatest single concentration of movable wealth on Earth into the hands of a foreigner. Thompson and his small crew were given strict orders and sailed out of Callao Harbor, the unimaginable cargo secured in its hold, with the future of Spanish power in the region resting on their shoulders. But the temptation proved too great. Once at sea, away from the eyes of Spanish officials, the allure of the treasure overcame any sense of duty or fear. Captain Thompson and his crew, their heads turned by the sheer magnitude of the wealth in their possession, mutinied. They murdered the Spanish guards and priests accompanying the treasure, threw their bodies overboard, and changed course. They were no longer hired transporters. They were now pirates in possession of the ultimate score. Their destination, according to the legend, was the remote and uninhabited Cocos Island, a speck of land some 300 miles off the coast of Costa Rica in the vast Pacific Ocean. It was the perfect hiding place, volcanic, rugged, and shrouded in mist, with numerous caves, waterfalls, and thick jungle to conceal their plunder. The story goes that Thompson and his men spent days, perhaps weeks, meticulously hauling the treasure inland. They used the island's natural features as landmarks, burying the chests of coins, the massive gold statues, and the jeweled religious artifacts in different locations, creating a detailed map to ensure they could return to reclaim their fortune once the heat had died down. But fate, as it so often does in these tales, intervened. They were captured by a Spanish warship. Most of the crew were summarily hanged for their piracy and treason. Only Captain Thompson and his first mate were spared, the story claims, on the condition that they lead the Spanish back to the treasure. Thompson, ever the cunning survivor, agreed. He led them on a wild goose chase around Cocos Island, pretending to search for the hiding spots he knew so well. Eventually, seizing an opportunity, he and his first mate escaped into the jungle and were never seen again by their captors. Before he died decades later, a supposed broken man in Newfoundland, Canada, Thompson is said to have drawn a map and passed the secret to a friend, igniting a treasure hunt that has consumed fortunes and lives for over 200 years. The legend of the treasure of Lima on Cocos Island is arguably the most famous buried treasure story in history, and it has drawn a who's who of adventurers to its shores. Perhaps the most famous seeker was the German August Gisler, who moved to the island in 1889 and spent nearly 20 years digging, tunneling, and searching, finding only a single gold coin for his efforts. The island was also the inspiration for Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island and is said to have been visited by Franklin D. Roosevelt, who financed an expedition there before he became president. The modern search is a blend of high-tech ambition and old-fashioned obsession. Expeditions have used everything from proton magnetometers and ground-penetrating radar to satellite imaging and deep drilling equipment, scouring the island's 120 square miles of treacherous terrain. They have followed not just Thompson's alleged map, but a dozen other maps and codes supposedly pointing to the treasure, including one famously complex cipher known as the Beale Papers. Yet Cocos Island guards its secrets fiercely. The volcanic soil shifts, waterfalls change course, and landslides regularly alter the landscape, making any 200-year-old landmarks nearly impossible to identify. The Costa Rican government, which declared the island a protected national park in 1978, has severely restricted digging, adding a legal barrier to the physical ones. This leads to the inevitable, haunting question: was the treasure ever there at all? Skeptics argue the entire story is a fantastic fabrication, a sailor's yarn that grew in the telling. They point out that the sheer volume and weight of the treasure described would have been logistically impossible for Thompson's small crew to unload and hide in such a short time on such a rugged island. Perhaps the Merry Deer was intercepted and captured by the Spanish after all, and the treasure was reclaimed, or perhaps Thompson and his men simply sailed off to a life of anonymous luxury, and the story of Cocos Island was a brilliant red herring to throw pursuers off their trail. But for every skeptic, there is a true believer, someone convinced that beneath the dense foliage of Cocos Island lies a hoard that could redefine the meaning of wealth, a glittering, ghostly testament to the moment a continent's fortune vanished into the mist. Transitioning from the high seas adventure of pirate gold, we now step into the opulent, gilded world of the Russian imperial court, where a lost treasure represents not plundered wealth, but the pinnacle of artistic craftsmanship and a poignant symbol of a doomed dynasty. The story of the lost Fabergé eggs begins with a simple, heartfelt gesture. In 1885, Tsar Alexander III commissioned a special Easter gift for his wife, the Tsarina Maria Feodorovna. He turned to the House of Fabergé, a jewelry firm renowned for its exquisite and innovative designs, headed by the master goldsmith Peter Carl Fabergé. The result was the hen egg, a seemingly simple enameled shell that opened to reveal a surprise within, a golden yolk, which itself opened to a golden hen, which then contained a tiny diamond replica of the imperial crown and a ruby pendant. The Tsarina was utterly delighted, and a tradition was born that would last for 32 years. Alexander III established the terms of what would become the most luxurious series of commissioned artworks in history. Fabergé was given a near-blank check and complete artistic freedom, with only 3 stipulations. Each egg had to be unique, each had to contain a surprise, and the theme of that surprise was to be a secret until the moment of presentation. This annual commission became the ultimate creative challenge for Fabergé and his team of master craftsmen, who worked for up to a year on each creation. Under the next Tsar, Nicholas II, the tradition expanded to 2 eggs each year, one for his mother, the Dowager Empress Maria Feodorovna, and one for his wife, Tsarina Alexandra Feodorovna. In total, 50 of these magnificent imperial Easter eggs were created between 1885 and 1916, each a breathtaking fusion of fine jewelry, mechanical ingenuity, and miniature portraiture. To call them Easter eggs is a profound understatement. They were masterpieces of the jeweler's art, intricate puzzles, and detailed historical chronicles rolled into one. The rosebud egg, for example, crafted from red guilloche enamel with gold and rose diamonds, opened to reveal a surprise of yellow enamel rosebuds, symbolizing the Tsar's love for his new bride. The Trans-Siberian Railway egg was made of silver, enamel, and quartz, with a route map of the railway inlaid on its surface. Its surprise was a miniature, clockwork model of the railway's steam locomotive and 5 coaches. The most extravagant, like the Moscow Kremlin egg, were virtual monuments in miniature, standing nearly a foot tall and replicating architectural wonders in exquisite detail. They were not merely gifts, they were declarations of love, celebrations of imperial achievements, and flawless demonstrations of Russian artistic supremacy. This glittering world of unparalleled luxury came to a sudden and violent end with the Russian Revolution of 1917. The Romanov dynasty was overthrown, and the Bolsheviks, seeking to fund their new government and symbolically erase the old regime, systematically looted the imperial palaces. The Fabergé eggs, along with countless other treasures, were confiscated and catalogued as state property. Many were stored away in the Kremlin armory, but others were deemed non-essential and were sold off to foreign dealers in the 1920s and 30s to raise hard currency for the struggling Soviet state. It was during this period of dispersal that several eggs simply vanished from the historical record, their whereabouts unknown, their fate a mystery. For decades, the imperial eggs were largely forgotten outside of academic circles, curiosities of a bygone era. Their rediscovery as objects of intense fascination began in a most unlikely place. In 1964, a scrap metal dealer in the American Midwest purchased a golden egg ornament for just over $8,000, intending to melt it down for its precious metal content. He found he couldn't break it open and eventually discovered its secret mechanism. Inside was a tiny Vacheron Constantin watch. Years later, this same dealer, curious about his unusual paperweight, did an internet search and stumbled upon an article about the lost imperial eggs. He contacted the experts at Fabergé, and after a tense authentication process, his piece was confirmed to be the third imperial egg, lost since 1922. He had purchased a masterpiece worth millions for a fraction of its value, a discovery that sent shockwaves through the art world and ignited a modern-day treasure hunt. This story exemplifies the ongoing quest to locate the missing eggs. Of the original 50, the whereabouts of 43 are currently known, mostly held in major museums or private collections like that of the Forbes family, and later the Russian oligarch Viktor Vekselberg, who amassed a significant collection to bring the eggs back to Russia. This leaves 7 eggs still unaccounted for, their absence a siren call to historians and collectors. The mystery is deepened by the fact that for several of these missing 7, we have detailed descriptions and even photographs from the imperial archives, making them instantly recognizable if they were to appear. They have names and known histories: the Nécessaire egg, a diamond-studded egg containing a set of ladies' toiletries, the cherub with chariot egg, and the royal Danish egg, created to commemorate Maria Fedorovna's ancestral home. The search for these lost masterpieces continues to capture the public imagination. Could one be gathering dust in a private home, its owners unaware of its true identity, much like the third imperial egg? Might others be hidden away in a forgotten bank vault or a private collection, their ownership a closely guarded secret? The possibility of another dramatic rediscovery is a very real one, a testament to the enduring allure of Fabergé's genius. These eggs are more than just fabulously expensive baubles. They are frozen moments of history, encapsulating the final golden age of the Russian monarchy, a world of unparalleled artistry that was about to be shattered forever. Each rediscovery is not just a financial windfall, it is the recovery of a lost chapter, a piece of a beautiful, broken puzzle finally clicking back into place. From the glittering, crafted luxury of the Fabergé eggs, we now journey back over 1,000 years into the mist-shrouded realm of Germanic myth and epic poetry, to a treasure that is not merely lost, but is fundamentally defined by the curse that guards it. This is the treasure of the Nibelungs, a hoard so immense and so tainted that its very possession guarantees tragedy, betrayal, and a bloody end for all who claim it. Its story is woven from 2 primary ancient texts, the Norse Volsunga saga and the German epic poem Nibelungenlied, written down in the 13th century but reflecting much older oral traditions. Unlike the other treasures on our list, this one exists first and foremost in the world of legend. yet its echoes are so powerful they have resonated through history, art, and music for centuries. The saga of the treasure begins not with a king but with a god. In the Volsunga saga, the hoard originally belonged to a dwarf named Andvari who guarded it from within a waterfall. When the trickster god Loki captured him and demanded all his gold, the dwarf pleaded to keep one single ring, a piece of his own craftsmanship. Loki ruthlessly took that too, and in his fury, Andvari laid a terrible curse upon the ring, and by extension the entire hoard, that it would destroy everyone who ever possessed it. This cursed gold then passed through the hands of kings and heroes, including the great dragon slayer Sigurd, the Norse counterpart to the German Siegfried. Sigurd himself won the treasure after slaying the dragon Fafnir, who was once a man transformed by his own greedy obsession with guarding the gold. This cycle of violence and possession is the very heart of the legend. The treasure is a passive, glittering poison that activates the worst impulses of everyone who encounters it. The German Nibelungenlied picks up the tale, focusing on the hero Siegfried. After defeating the Nibelungs, a race of dwarves, and acquiring their vast hoard, which includes a cloak of invisibility, the young prince arrives at the court of the Burgundians. There, his immense strength and the treasure he commands make him a figure of awe and envy. He uses his power to help King Gunther win the hand of the Ice Queen Brunhild, but in doing so, he earns the bitter hatred of Gunther's vassal Hagen. The central tragedy unfolds when Siegfried's wife, Kriemhild, trusting in the security of her husband's power, reveals the one secret vulnerability on his back to Hagen. This leads to Siegfried's murder, and in a shocking act of greed, Hagen and the Burgundian king seize the Nibelung treasure for themselves. They force Kriemhild to bring it from its hiding place, and then, fearful of its power and her wrath, they sink every last piece of it into the Rhine River at a spot near the modern city of Worms, hoping to bury the curse along with the gold. This act of sinking the treasure into the Rhine is the pivotal moment of its legend, transforming it from a physical object into an eternal, unattainable myth. Kriemhild's subsequent revenge is horrifying and total. She marries Attila the Hun and lures her brothers and Hagen to his court, where she orchestrates a massacre that kills every last one of the Burgundians. But she, too, is killed in the process. The curse of the Nibelung gold thus claims every single character in the epic, fulfilling the dwarf Andvari's prophecy with brutal finality. The treasure remains at the bottom of the river, a lost and poisoned dream, its location known only to the slain Hagen, who takes the secret to his grave. What makes this legend so endlessly fascinating is its tantalizing connection to real history. The Nibelungenlied is set at the court of the Burgundians, a real Germanic tribe that was indeed destroyed by Huns, though not by Attila himself in the 5th century. This historical kernel of truth, a tribe wiped from the map, provided the perfect fertile ground for a story about a cursed treasure that brings about utter annihilation. The figure of Attila the Hun, or Etzel as he is called in the poem, looms large, and while he was not involved in the Burgundians' actual downfall, his inclusion ties the myth to a specific, fearsome historical era. The legend effectively processes a real historical trauma through a mythological lens, using the treasure as the symbolic cause of that destruction. Centuries later, the ring's curse would inspire one of the most monumental achievements in the history of music. In the 19th century, German composer Richard Wagner became utterly obsessed with these myths. He wove the tales from the Volsunga saga and the Nibelungenlied into his epic 4-opera cycle, Der Ring des Nibelungen, the Ring of the Nibelung. For Wagner, the cursed gold was the perfect symbol for the corrupting nature of power and the destructive force of industrial age greed. His operas, which famously require 15 hours to perform in full, follow the ring from its creation by the Rhine maidens to its eventual return to them, after it brings about the literal end of the world of the gods, the Götterdämmerung. Wagner's interpretation cemented the Nibelung treasure in the modern imagination, transforming it from a medieval epic into a universal parable. and this leads to the unavoidable modern question, could any of it be real? The legend is so specific about the treasure being sunk in the Rhine that it has, unsurprisingly, inspired countless searches. The most notorious occurred in the 1950s, when a former German SS officer turned treasure hunter named Karl Wilhelm Mühleck claimed to have discovered the hoard using sonar equipment near a riverbank in Bavaria. His story captured international headlines, but it quickly unraveled. The ingots he supposedly found were revealed to be lead, and the entire affair was exposed as an elaborate hoax, a desperate attempt to profit from a nation's collective myth. No serious archaeological evidence for the treasure has ever been found, nor is it ever likely to be, because its power does not lie in its physical reality. The true treasure of the Nibelungs is its enduring story. It is the ultimate cautionary tale about the corrupting nature of wealth and the inevitable doom that follows when greed overrides honor, love, and loyalty. It is a myth that has outlived empires, inspiring not only Wagner but countless novels, films, and even psychological concepts like the Ring of Power complex. The treasure itself is irrelevant. It is the curse that is the real point. The gold remains where it was always meant to be, at the bottom of the Rhine, and more importantly, buried deep within our collective consciousness, a permanent warning that some treasures are far too expensive ever to possess. Moving from the mythical curse of the Nibelung gold, we now turn to a treasure that was very much real, a tangible symbol of royal power that served as a direct link to the dawn of French history, only to be lost in the chaotic fervor of revolution. The scepter of Dagobert was no ordinary piece of royal jewelry. It was arguably the most sacred and ancient item in the entire collection of French regalia, a physical artifact that connected the kings of France to their Merovingian origins. Crafted for King Dagobert I in the early 7th century, this scepter was a masterpiece of early medieval goldsmithing. At its apex stood a finely wrought bronze figurine of a resting bird, believed to be a dove or an eagle, a symbol of royal authority and divine blessing. The shaft was a marvel of cloisonné enamel and intricate metalwork, inlaid with precious stones and patterns that spoke to the artistic prowess of a period often mischaracterized as the Dark Ages. For over 1,000 years, this scepter was more than an object. It was a living testament to the unbroken continuity of the French monarchy. Its historical journey is remarkably well documented, adding a layer of poignant tragedy to its loss. The scepter was carefully preserved in the Royal Abbey of Saint Denis, just north of Paris, the traditional burial place of French kings and the repository for the crown jewels and coronation regalia. For centuries, it played a crucial role in the Sacre, the coronation ceremony of the French monarchs. While the crown was placed upon the king's head and the sword was girded to his side, the scepter of Dagobert was placed in his right hand. This act was deeply symbolic, connecting the new king directly to the ancient Frankish ruler Dagobert, who was revered as a just and strong monarch and a benefactor of the church. To hold the scepter was to literally grasp the legacy of the first great king of the Franks, a powerful piece of political theater that reinforced the legitimacy and historical weight of the monarchy with every new reign. This deep symbolic significance is precisely what made it a primary target during the radical upheaval of the French Revolution. In the summer of 1792, the newly established National Convention declared France a republic and put the deposed King Louis XVI on trial for treason. As part of a systematic effort to erase all symbols of the ancient regime, a decree was issued ordering the destruction of all royal tombs and emblems. On a chaotic day in July, a mob descended upon the Saint Denis Basilica. They broke into the royal tombs, desecrating and discarding the centuries-old remains of kings and queens. They then turned their attention to the treasury, smashing display cases and seizing the priceless coronation regalia. The scepter of Dagobert, along with crowns, orbs, swords, and other precious items, was looted from its sacred home and hauled away to be melted down. The fate of these treasures was clinical and brutal. The objects were taken to the Hôtel de la Monnaie, the royal mint in Paris. There, under the watchful eyes of revolutionary officials, the accumulated artistic heritage of the French monarchy was fed into the furnaces. The exquisite goldwork of the scepter, the gemstones pried from their settings, the enamel that had survived for over a millennium, all of it was reduced to raw bullion and coinage to fund the Republic's wars and its struggling economy. It was an act of ideological purification through destruction, a deliberate attempt to liquidate the past itself. While some pieces from the treasury, like the 9th century sword of Charlemagne, were somehow saved from the melt and later returned to Saint Denis, the scepter of Dagobert was almost certainly lost forever in those fires. The disappearance of such a well-documented and iconic object has, of course, spawned alternative theories, though none carry much historical weight. A persistent rumor suggests that a loyalist or a savvy official within the mint might have switched the ancient scepter with a replica, saving the original and spiriting it away to safety. Others have speculated it could have been stolen during the looting before it even reached the mint, perhaps finding its way into a private collection where it remains hidden to this day. However, the meticulous records kept by the revolutionary government, which itemized the vast quantity of gold and silver obtained from the melted regalia, make these scenarios highly unlikely. The tragic, probable truth is that the scepter of Dagobert, one of the oldest and most significant artifacts of European monarchy, was converted into anonymous coins, its historical value utterly obliterated for its fleeting material worth. Its absence is a stark reminder of how quickly the tide of history can turn, and how the symbols of one age can become the fuel for the next. Our journey now takes us into the shadowy, intrigue-filled world of the medieval warrior monks, an order so powerful and wealthy that its sudden destruction gave birth to one of history's most enduring treasure mysteries. The Knights Templar began in the early 12th century as a small band of knights sworn to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. From this humble mission, they evolved into the most formidable military and financial institution of the Middle Ages. Through donations from pious nobles and savvy business dealings, they amassed vast estates, built a network of fortifications, and most importantly, pioneered international banking. Pilgrims and nobles could deposit funds at a Templar preceptory in their home country and withdraw it in the Holy Land using a letter of credit, a system that made them the de facto bankers to kings and popes. By the dawn of the 14th century, the order was unimaginably rich, controlling not just land but a constant flow of cash and treasure across Christendom. This immense power and wealth inevitably attracted a powerful and avaricious enemy, King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair. By 1307, Philip was drowning in debt, much of it owed to the Templars themselves. He also coveted their financial infrastructure to solidify his own control over France. On Friday, October 13, 1307, he launched a carefully coordinated, devastating surprise attack. In a single dawn raid across the entire country, his officials arrested hundreds of Templar knights, including the Order's Grand Master, Jacques de Molay. The charges were shocking: heresy, blasphemy, idolatry, and sodomy, allegations almost certainly fabricated to justify seizing their assets and eliminating their power. It was a breathtaking act of betrayal against an order that had served the Church for nearly 2 centuries. But when Philip's men rushed to the Templar headquarters in Paris, the Temple Fortress, to confiscate the Order's legendary treasury, they found something perplexing. The main vaults were not empty, but they contained nowhere near the immense wealth that was expected. The vast liquid assets, the legendary hoard of gold, silver, jewels, and sacred relics they were known to possess had vanished. According to the official royal inventory, they found only minor assets and a great deal of accounting ledgers. This immediate discrepancy is the very core of the mystery. Where did the treasure go? The most plausible explanation is that the Templars, with their sophisticated intelligence network, had gotten wind of the king's plans. In the days or weeks leading up to the infamous Friday the 13th, they had acted with precision to save their core wealth. This is where legend and history become beautifully, frustratingly intertwined. The most persistent tale claims that a convoy of treasure-laden carts, disguised as a shipment of hay or building materials, was smuggled out of Paris under cover of night. But where was it headed? One compelling theory points to the Templar fleet. The order owned a large number of ships based at their great port of La Rochelle on France's Atlantic coast. In the days following the arrests, chronicles note that this entire fleet simply disappeared without a trace. This has led to centuries of speculation that the treasure was loaded onto these ships and sailed to safety. But the destination remains the subject of fierce debate. Some legends say the fleet sailed north, finding refuge in Scotland. This theory gains traction from the timing. Scotland was under excommunication at the time, making it a safe haven from the Pope's authority, which Philip was using to destroy the order. It suggested that Templar knights fought alongside Robert the Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, and that their hidden treasure helped fund the Scottish War of Independence. Others propose the ships sailed west across the Atlantic. Proponents of this theory point to the Templars' alleged knowledge of pre-Columbian transoceanic travel, perhaps gained through their access to ancient Phoenician or Norse charts in the Library of Constantinople. Could they have sought a completely new world, free from the reach of kings and popes? This audacious idea suggests a connection to the mysterious carvings on the famous Westford Night Rock in Massachusetts or the Newport Tower in Rhode Island, though mainstream archaeology largely dismisses these as later creations. The treasure itself is as mysterious as its destination. What exactly was on those ships? It certainly included gold and silver bullion, church plate, and jewels. But many believe the true treasure was something far more significant. Documents proving the Templars had discovered heretical secrets about the true nature of Christianity, or perhaps even sacred relics like the Holy Grail or the mummified head of John the Baptist, which they were said to venerate. This idea that the treasure was not just wealth but knowledge adds an entirely new layer of intrigue to the hunt. The modern search for the Templar treasure is a global pursuit. In Scotland, enthusiasts scour Rosslyn Chapel, famously featured in the Da Vinci Code, for hidden vaults and coded symbols. In France, treasure hunters investigate the intricate network of tunnels beneath the village of Rennes-le-Château, a place later entangled with Templar mythology. Others look to Canada, specifically to Oak Island in Nova Scotia, where the complex and booby-trapped money pit has consumed the fortunes of seekers for over 2 centuries, with some believing it to be the final resting place of the Templar horde. Despite all the searching, no definitive evidence has ever surfaced. The lost treasure of the Knights Templar endures not as a physical reality, but as the ultimate historical what-if, a story of immense power, sudden betrayal, and a secret so well kept that it has remained hidden for over 700 years. But not all lost treasures are crafted from gold or jewels. Some are carved from the very bone of our ancient past, holding a value to science that transcends any material wealth. This brings us to one of the most devastating losses in the history of paleoanthropology, the priceless fossils of Peking man, discovered in the 1920s at Zhoukoudian, a cave system near Beijing. These remains were nothing short of a scientific revolution. They consisted of near-complete skullcaps, mandibles, teeth, and postcranial bones from approximately 40 different individuals, all representing Homo erectus, a direct ancestor of modern humans. Dating back an astonishing 500,000 years, these fossils provided the first clear, compelling evidence that humanity's origins were deeply rooted in Asia as well as Africa. They offered an unprecedented window into the life of our ancient relatives, their tools, their use of fire, their diet, and their physical structure. To lose them was to lose a foundational chapter of the human story. As the dark clouds of the Second Sino-Japanese War gathered in 1941, the scientists at the Peking Union Medical College, where the fossils were housed, faced an agonizing dilemma. They knew the advancing Japanese army would either destroy the irreplaceable remains or seize them as a cultural trophy. A desperate plan was hatched to safeguard this patrimony of all humankind. The fossils would be secretly evacuated to the United States for safekeeping until the conflict ended. With immense care, the bones were packed into 2 large wooden footlockers. The packing was a meticulous, reverent process. Each fossil was first wrapped in tissue paper, then swaddled in medical gauze and cotton wool. These bundles were carefully placed in small wooden boxes, which were then packed into the larger crates, with the empty spaces filled with more tissue paper to prevent any shifting or damage during transit. The crates were then handed over to a contingent of United States Marines who were being evacuated from Beijing. Their mission was to transport the crates by train to the port of Qinhuangdao and load them onto the USS President Harrison, a passenger ship that would carry them to safety. The Marines and their precious cargo never made it. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and within hours they also attacked the Marine detachments in China. The train carrying the Marines and the Peking Man fossils was intercepted by Japanese troops. In the ensuing chaos and capture, the 2 footlockers vanished. They simply disappeared from history at that precise moment. The USS President Harrison, the intended rescue ship, itself ran aground and was captured by the Japanese before it could even reach the port. Every link in this carefully planned chain of custody had been shattered by the sudden, violent outbreak of full-scale war. What followed was one of the most frantic and fruitless treasure hunts in scientific history. As soon as the war ended, investigations were launched by the United States, China, and the Allied powers. They questioned everyone involved: the captured Marines, Japanese officers, and local Chinese witnesses. The leads were numerous, conflicting, and ultimately led nowhere. The mystery of the Peking Man fossils has since spawned a web of compelling, yet unproven, theories. One prevailing idea is that the crates were simply discarded by soldiers who had no idea of their contents, mistaken for ordinary military supplies or personal baggage, and were destroyed or buried in the confusion of the invasion. They could have been lost in a warehouse fire or thrown into the sea. Another persistent theory suggests the Japanese did indeed confiscate the crates and ship them to Japan. Proponents of this idea point to vague rumors of the fossils being stored in a museum or a military installation, only to be destroyed in the relentless Allied bombing campaigns that ravaged Japanese cities like Tokyo. Alternatively, they could have been buried in a secret cache that was later forgotten. A more tantalizing, though less likely, theory posits that the fossils did actually make it to the United States but were somehow misdirected. Perhaps they sit in a military storage facility or a private collection, their true identity lost to the decades, their labels faded, their contents a mystery to their current owners. The search has never truly ceased. Over the decades, offers of massive rewards have been made, and numerous alleged sightings have been investigated, from a locker in a Tokyo museum to a rumored location under a parking lot in Qinhuangdao. In the 1970s, a businessman even claimed to have been given a mysterious box that might contain the fossils, only to have his hopes dashed. Each new lead generates a flicker of excitement in the scientific community, but so far, everyone has evaporated into disappointment. The loss of the Peking Man fossils is a haunting void, a permanent gap in our understanding of human evolution. Their recovery would be one of the greatest scientific discoveries of the modern age, not for the monetary value, but for the priceless knowledge they hold, a missing link, not just in our family tree, but in the very story we tell about ourselves. While the fate of Peking Man represents a loss to all humanity, our next treasure holds a significance that is profoundly national, a symbol of identity and sovereignty for a people who have repeatedly fought to preserve both. This brings us to the legendary crown of Bolesław I the Brave, the very first royal crown of Poland. More than just a piece of regalia, this crown was the ultimate symbol of a hard-won and unified kingdom. Bolesław, known as the Brave or the Valiant, was a pivotal figure in early Polish history, following in the footsteps of his father, Mieszko I, who had converted Poland to Christianity. Bolesław expanded the realm's borders through military might and shrewd diplomacy, earning the recognition of Holy Roman Emperor Otto III. In the year 1000, at the Congress of Gniezno, the emperor famously placed his own crown on Bolesław's head in a gesture of royal friendship and acknowledgement of Poland's equal status, an event that was interpreted as a de facto coronation. While his official coronation as the first king of Poland would come 25 years later, this crown, likely crafted for that momentous occasion, became the physical embodiment of the Polish state itself. Historical records, though fragmented, describe a magnificent object befitting the foundation of a kingdom. It was almost certainly crafted from the finest gold, richly adorned with precious gemstones like sapphires, rubies, and pearls in the style of the high medieval period. As the primary insignia of the Polish monarchy, it would have been used in the coronations of his immediate successors. Its weight on a new king's head a powerful reminder of the authority and responsibility they were inheriting. However, the golden age it represented was tragically short-lived. The crown's documented history is vague, and it likely did not remain the sole coronation crown for long, as new regalia were often created for subsequent rulers. Its ultimate fate is tied to the tumultuous and often devastating history of Poland itself, a nation that has been erased from the map and reborn multiple times. The most plausible and tragic theory is that the crown was lost, destroyed, or melted down during one of the many foreign invasions that battered Poland in the centuries following Bolesław's reign. The 13th century alone was a period of immense fragmentation and catastrophe, including the devastating Mongol invasions of 1241, which saw cities like Krakow razed to the ground. In such chaos, royal treasuries were prime targets for looters. The crown's precious materials would have held immediate value for any conqueror, its symbolic meaning irrelevant next to the price its gold and gems could fetch. It could have been broken apart to pay soldiers or simply seized as war booty by a Mongol commander, its components scattered across Asia and Europe, forever losing their original form and significance. Another compelling possibility is that it was lost during the period known as the brutal theft of 1300. This was not a foreign invasion, but an act of stunning betrayal by the future King Wenceslaus II of Bohemia. In a ruthless political move, he invaded Greater Poland, seized the royal treasury stored in the Cathedral of Gniezno, and made off with the entirety of Poland's royal insignia, which almost certainly included the crown of Bolesław. He took this treasure back to Prague to legitimize his own claim to the Polish throne. While some Polish regalia were eventually returned, there is no record of Bolesław's crown being among them. It may have remained in Bohemia, only to be later melted down or lost during the many conflicts that also plagued the Czech lands, its Polish origins forgotten. Yet, for a nation with a spirit as indomitable as Poland's, the idea that their foundational crown was merely destroyed is a difficult pill to swallow. This has given rise to a more hopeful, though less likely, theory that it was hidden. Perhaps a loyal bishop or nobleman, foreseeing an imminent invasion like the Mongol onslaught, secretly removed the crown from the treasury to protect it from desecration. It could have been concealed within the walls of a cathedral, buried beneath a monastery, or hidden in a remote royal castle, its location known only to a trusted few who, for whatever reason, never lived to reveal the secret. The countless castles, cathedrals, and ancient forests of Poland hold countless secrets, and the notion that this most sacred artifact is still there, waiting for a chance discovery, is a powerful national hope. The search for the crown is less about treasure hunting and more about reclaiming a stolen identity. For Poland, a nation that endured over a century of partition and the atrocities of World War II, symbols of uninterrupted sovereignty are incredibly potent. The recovery of Bolslaw's crown would be akin to finding the original Declaration of Independence or the crown of King Arthur. It would be a direct, tangible link to the very moment of national birth. While no major official searches are underway, the likely time for its loss being too distant and the clues far too cold, the crown remains a powerful subject of historical inquiry and cultural fascination. It represents not just lost gold and jewels, but the unbreakable idea of Poland itself, an idea that has proven far more durable than any precious metal. But from the dry land of lost crowns and sunken hopes, we now set sail into a real-life storm of unimaginable fury, where not just one ship, but an entire nation's annual wealth was devoured by the sea in a single catastrophic night. The story of the 1715 Spanish treasure fleet is one of the most dramatic and well-documented maritime disasters in history, a moment where imperial ambition collided head-on with the raw, indifferent power of nature. Every year, a convoy known as the Flota de Indias would undertake the perilous voyage from the Americas to Spain, its holds crammed with the extracted riches of an empire. The 1715 fleet was especially laden, carrying a king's ransom that had been accumulated over several years due to war delays. There were 11 ships in total, but the most infamous, and the one that holds the greatest mystery, was the Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, though it was more commonly and affectionately known by its nickname, the San Miguel. As the capitana, or flagship of the fleet, it bore not only the commander but also the most concentrated portion of the treasure, a staggering cargo of silver bars, minted coins, and a special consignment of exceptionally large and flawless muso emeralds from the mines of Colombia, intended for the Spanish crown. The fleet's journey began with promise, departing from Havana, Cuba, on July 24, 1715. They were behind schedule, dangerously so, and the experienced pilots knew they were entering the height of hurricane season. But the pressure to deliver the treasure to a financially strained King Philip V was immense. For a week, they made good progress, riding the Gulf Stream north along the Florida coast. Then, on July 31st, the weather began to deteriorate rapidly. The barometer plummeted, the winds shifted violently, and the sky turned an ominous greenish black. By nightfall, the fleet was caught in the eye wall of a massive hurricane, a storm of such ferocity that it would be remembered for centuries. The ships, their sails shredded and their wooden hulls groaning, were driven helplessly toward the shallow, razor-sharp coral reefs off the coast of Florida. One by one, they were smashed apart. The sounds of snapping masts tearing wood and the screams of drowning men were drowned out only by the roar of the wind and waves. By the morning of August 1st, 10 of the 11 ships had been destroyed, scattered along 40 miles of coastline from present-day Sebastian to Cape Canaveral. Over 1,000 souls perished and tons of treasure were scattered across the ocean floor. In the immediate, desperate aftermath, Spanish salvage crews arrived from Havana. Using Indian divers and primitive bell-shaped diving machines, they managed to recover a significant amount of the scattered silver from the known wreck sites over the next few years. But the sea guarded its secrets well. One ship was conspicuously absent from the graveyard, the San Miguel. While the other 10 ships were accounted for, the flagship had seemingly vanished. Contemporary Spanish accounts tell us that the San Miguel, perhaps because it was a newer and sturdier vessel, or through sheer seamanship, managed to separate from the doomed fleet at the height of the storm. It was seen struggling northward, battling the waves while the others were driven westward onto the reefs. It is believed the storm-driven currents carried it further north, away from the main disaster area, where it ultimately succumbed to the waves and sank in much deeper, unknown waters. Because its location was never discovered by the Spanish salvagers, its legendary cargo, the bulk of the fleet's emeralds and a huge portion of its silver remained on the seabed, perfectly preserved and completely lost. This single fact has made the San Miguel the ultimate holy grail for modern shipwreck salvagers and marine archaeologists. The known wrecks of the 1715 fleet have been systematically worked for decades, most famously by Real 8 Company and later by explorers like Mel Fisher, yielding millions of dollars in coins and artifacts. But these are the scattered remains of the ships that broke apart on the reefs. The San Miguel is different. It represents the possibility of a largely intact wreck site, a sealed time capsule resting in deeper, calmer water. Imagine not just scattered coins, but entire chests of silver reals still stacked in the hold, the personal belongings of the officers and nobility aboard, and most tantalizingly, the sealed strongboxes containing those legendary, fist-sized muso emeralds. For a treasure hunter, finding the San Miguel wouldn't just be a payday. It would be the career-defining discovery of a lifetime, the recovery of a complete chapter of history that was lost in a single night. The modern search is a high-stakes game of historical deduction and cutting-edge technology. Salvagers and historians pore over the original Spanish shipping manifests and salvage reports, cross-referencing them with modern oceanographic data. They use side-scan sonar to map the seafloor, magnetometers to detect the iron cannon and anchors that would have gone down with the ship, and sub-bottom profilers to look for objects buried beneath centuries of sand and silt. The search area is vast, stretching from the known wreck sites northward along the Florida coast, covering thousands of square miles of ocean. Every potential anomaly on a sonar readout sparks a surge of hope, but the Atlantic is littered with the wreckage of centuries, and each target must be investigated by divers or remotely operated vehicles, a painstaking and expensive process. The legacy of the San Miguel is a powerful reminder that even in an age of satellites and robotics, the ocean is still the greatest keeper of secrets, holding onto its most prized treasures until it is good and ready to give them up. Now we move from the storm-lashed coasts of Florida to the quiet, hallowed halls of ancient scholarship, to ponder a loss not of gold or jewels, but of pure, world-altering thought. Among the countless scrolls that may have vanished with the Library of Alexandria, the absence of one particular set of writings stands as a particularly haunting void for philosophy and literature alike, the lost works of Aristotle. We know him today through dense, complex treatises on logic, physics, and metaphysics texts like the Nicomachean Ethics and Physics. These are his so-called esoteric works, meaning they were written for internal use within his school, the Lyceum. They are technical, meticulous, and often incredibly difficult for a modern reader to digest. But ancient historians like Cicero and Plutarch described a very different Aristotle. They spoke with admiration of his exoteric works, beautifully crafted dialogues intended for public consumption, written with a literary flair that rivaled his teacher, Plato. Imagine the Socrates of Plato's dialogues, witty, probing, and endlessly engaging, using myth and metaphor to draw his listeners toward profound truths. According to these ancient sources, Aristotle himself was a master of this style before he developed his own, more systematic approach. His dialogue Eudemus, for instance, was said to be a powerful exploration of the immortality of the soul, as moving as Plato's Phaedo. Another, on philosophy, apparently laid out a grand, sweeping vision of the history of human thought and the nature of the divine. These weren't dry academic texts, they were compelling works of art designed to persuade and enlighten a broad audience, showcasing the full range of Aristotle's genius not just as a thinker, but as a writer and a storyteller. They were the bridge between the captivating world of Platonic dialogue and the rigorous system of Aristotelian logic. So what happened to these captivating works? Their disappearance is one of history's great intellectual tragedies, and the timeline points directly to the same series of catastrophes that doomed the Library of Alexandria. The story goes that Aristotle bequeathed his personal library, containing his own manuscripts and a vast collection of books, to his successor, Theophrastus. From there, it passed to a man named Nellius, who supposedly took the collection to his home in Sepsis, in Asia Minor. There, the precious scrolls were allegedly hidden away in a damp cellar to prevent them from being seized by agents of the Pergamene kings who were aggressively building a rival library. They remained in this neglected state for nearly 2 centuries, suffering damage from moisture and insects before being sold off to a collector who eventually brought them to Athens and then to Rome. It was the Roman general Sulla who finally seized the library and brought it to Rome in 86 BC, where the scholar Tyrannian began to organize the damaged manuscripts, and the philosopher Andronicus of Rhodes eventually compiled and edited what we now know as the Aristotelian corpus. This tortuous journey suggests that by the time these works reached Rome, many may have been too damaged to be fully recovered, the more popular exoteric dialogues, having been copied and distributed more widely, might have survived elsewhere. But if the master copies from Aristotle's own school were the ones rotting in that cellar, their loss would have been irreplaceable, and if any copies had made it to the great library in Alexandria, they would have shared the same fiery fate as the rest of its collection, consumed in the flames of war and religious purges that swept through the city over the centuries. The works that ultimately survived were the technical, academic ones used by philosophers in the Lyceum, the esoteric texts. The beautiful, popular dialogues, the ones that would have ensured his popular legacy as a great writer, simply faded from existence, their words returning to dust. Recovering these lost works would be nothing short of a revolution for our understanding of Western philosophy. It would be like finding the first draft of a masterpiece, allowing us to see the intellectual journey of one of history's greatest minds. We might finally understand how the young Aristotle, the brilliant student of Plato, evolved into the formidable system builder who founded his own school. Did he dramatically break with his teacher's ideas, or was it a more subtle and nuanced transition? These dialogues could hold the key. Furthermore, they might illuminate areas of his thought that remain shadowy in his surviving works. His views on the soul, on rhetoric, and on the ultimate nature of happiness might have been expressed with a clarity and passion that is sometimes missing from his lecture notes. The loss of Aristotle's popular works created a version of the philosopher that is austere and intimidating. Finding them would reintroduce us to the man, a charismatic and eloquent thinker who could captivate a general audience, a side of his genius that has been lost for over 2 millennia. Shifting our focus from the lost words of ancient philosophers to the stolen brilliance of a Renaissance masterpiece, we arrive at a mystery that is both incredibly specific and utterly baffling: the theft of a single painted panel from one of the most important artworks in the world. The Ghent altarpiece, also known as the Adoration of the Mystic Lamb, created by the brothers Hubert and Jan van Eyck and completed in 1432, is widely considered the first major masterpiece of the Northern Renaissance. A monumental polyptych comprised of 24 individual panels, it represents a quantum leap in oil painting technique, with its breathtaking realism, luminous colors, and intricate symbolism. But on the night of April 10, 1934, the altarpiece became the victim of a crime that would remain unsolved for nearly a century. Thieves broke into the St. Bavo Cathedral in Ghent, Belgium, and pried 2 panels from the lower left section. One was St. John the Baptist, which was found shortly after, abandoned in a nearby building. The other was the Just Judges panel, and it would simply vanish into the ether, leaving behind one of the art world's most enduring and bizarre cold cases. The stolen panel itself is a fascinating work. It doesn't depict saints or biblical scenes in a traditional, ethereal sense. Instead, the Just Judges shows a group of mounted figures, believed to be historical and contemporary rulers, riding toward the central scene of the Lamb of God. What makes it so significant is its groundbreaking naturalism. These aren't idealized types, they are portraits of specific, recognizable individuals, painted with Van Eyck's signature microscopic detail. Their faces are alive with character, their clothing rendered with textural perfection. Its loss meant the mutilation of a unified artistic vision, a whole in a story that was meant to be read as a whole. The theft was a national trauma for Belgium, a brazen act of cultural desecration that gripped the entire country. What followed was a surreal and often farcical series of events centered on a mysterious figure named Arsène Godetier. A stockbroker and a respected local church warden in the town of Wetteren, Godetier was also a passionate, somewhat obsessive art lover. Just months after the theft, the Bishop of Ghent began receiving a series of cryptic ransom notes demanding a huge sum of 1 million Belgian francs for the panel's return. The correspondence was signed with a distinctive emblem, a small, crudely drawn star and the letters D, U, A. The negotiations were bizarre and theatrical. The thief provided a single, small piece of the panel's original oak frame as proof of possession and gave absurdly precise instructions for the ransom drop, including that the money be delivered by a lone official on a specific bicycle. The Belgian government and the church, however, refused to pay, steadfast in their belief that you cannot negotiate with cultural terrorists. The mystery took its most dramatic turn with the sudden death of Arsène Godetier. In November of that same year, he suffered a heart attack during a meeting, and on his deathbed, he reportedly confessed to his lawyer, "I alone know where the mystic lamb is. The information is in the drawer on the right of my writing table. I am going to die." This bombshell deathbed confession seemed to crack the case wide open. Sure enough, in the drawer, they found the carbon copies of the exact ransom notes that had been sent to the bishop, along with a detailed draft of a final, unsent letter that provided a long, complicated clue to the panel's location. The letter stated the panel could be found in a place where it would be impossible for me, nor for anyone else, to take it out without drawing the public's attention. It seemed like the ultimate cliffhanger. The thief was identified and he had left a map, but the clue was a masterpiece of misdirection. The unsent letter pointed investigators toward the vast, labyrinthine cathedral itself. For months, they searched every conceivable nook and cranny. They tapped on walls, peered into crypts, and even partially drained the moat around the cathedral, all to no avail. The phrase about it being impossible to remove without being seen was interpreted to mean it was immured within the building's very structure. Yet, after an exhaustive search, nothing was found. This led many to believe that Godetier was not acting alone and that his accomplice, perhaps angered by his confession, had moved the panel after his death. Others theorized that the dying man was delusional or that the entire deathbed scene was a final, cruel hoist. The investigation hit a dead end and the case grew cold for decades, leaving only the tantalizing copies of the ransom notes and the infuriatingly vague clue. The mystery of the just judges has never truly faded. It has been the subject of countless books, documentaries, and obsessive amateur investigations. Every few years, a new theory emerges, often from retired police detectives or passionate historians. Some of the most persistent ideas suggest the panel was hidden in a specific, overlooked pillar within the cathedral. Others believe it was smuggled out of the country and sold to a private collector, perhaps in the United States, where it remains in a secret vault. A more outlandish theory, popularized in the mid-20th century, claimed the panel was hidden in the coffin of Godetier's accomplice, a man who had died around the same time. In 2016, the cathedral authorities even went so far as to use advanced radar to scan the floor around this suspect's grave, but they found nothing. The case is a perfect storm of dead ends, red herrings, and a central clue that seems to promise everything but delivers nothing. In a strange coda to the story, the missing panel's absence is currently filled by a remarkably skilled copy painted in 1945 by the Belgian restorer Jeff van der Wecken. It's a testament to van der Wecken's talent that most visitors to the cathedral today have no idea they are looking at a replacement. But for art historians and conservators, the copy is a permanent placeholder, a reminder of a wound that has never healed. The ongoing investigation, now handled by the Belgian Federal Police, remains officially open. Advances in technology, from ground-penetrating radar to AI-assisted analysis of old case files, offer a glimmer of hope that a fresh perspective might finally crack Godotier's code. The dream persists that the just judges is still intact, hidden in some forgotten space, waiting for the right person to finally understand a dying man's last words and return a priceless piece of artistic heritage to its rightful home. But the legend of lost Mexican gold extends far beyond a single Hollywood plot, deep into the dusty, sun-bleached canyons of the Sierra Madre. This vast mountain range, whose very name evokes a sense of remote and rugged mystery, has been the backdrop for real-life treasure dreams for over 4 centuries, fueled by a potent mix of Aztec legend and Spanish colonial greed. The fiction of the film taps into a historical reality far richer and more enduring. Long before Bandit Gold Hat made his infamous claim, Spanish conquistadors were spinning tales of mountains literally made of precious metal, stories they had often first heard from the people they conquered. The origins of this mythos can be traced back to the Aztec Empire itself. Spanish chroniclers, most notably Friar Bernardino de Sahagun, recorded indigenous tales of the Cihuacotl, or Serpent Woman, a protective spirit who was said to guard the immense mineral wealth of the earth. More concretely, they wrote of the Aztecs' own sources of gold and silver, mines that were so rich and so secret that their locations were known only to a select few and were often deliberately concealed or flooded to protect them from the invaders. When the Spanish captured the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, the vast quantities of gold in Moctezuma's treasury had to come from somewhere, and the obsessive question for every conquistador became, where is the source? This burning question launched 1,000 expeditions into the uncharted northern territories, each man dreaming of being the one to find the mother lode. And indeed, they found veins of almost unimaginable wealth. The real history of the Sierra Madre is punctuated by discoveries that eclipse even the wildest fiction. The most famous of these is the legendary Lost Teopa mine, said to be located in the remote barrancas of Sonora. Founded in the 16th century, the Teopa district was rumored to have produced silver so pure that it didn't even require smelting. The ore was simply cut into blocks and shipped directly to the crown. Then, in the mid-17th century, during a massive uprising by the indigenous Tarahumara people, the mines were attacked, the Spanish miners were killed or driven out, and the precise locations of the richest shafts were lost seemingly overnight. The jungle and the mountains quickly reclaimed the landscape, leaving only cryptic directions and faded maps behind. For the next 300 years, Teopa became the holy grail for Mexican prospectors, a ghost of incredible wealth just waiting to be rediscovered. This pattern repeated itself again and again, creating a tapestry of lost bonanzas. There was the Lost Padre mine, supposedly discovered by a Jesuit priest who used its silver to fund his missions until he was killed, taking its secret with him. There was the fabulous Planchas de Plata, or slabs of silver, an enormous surface deposit of almost pure silver discovered in the 18th century with chunks weighing hundreds of pounds. While the main deposit was found and mined, legends persist that an even larger sister deposit exists somewhere nearby, waiting for a lucky wanderer to stumble upon it. The fundamental truth behind all these stories is the extreme isolation and danger of the Sierra Madre. A prospector who found a rich vein might work it alone for a season, but if he fell ill, was killed by bandits, or was caught in a landslide, his secret died with him. The land itself was the perfect vault, swallowing discoveries whole and resetting the treasure hunt for the next generation. This is the historical bedrock upon which the fiction of the treasure of the Sierra Madre is built. Arthur B. Traven, a mysterious figure who himself vanished into the lore of Mexico, absorbed these local legends and understood the psychological toll of the hunt. The gold his characters find isn't in a chest, it's in the ground, requiring back-breaking labor to extract. This mirrors the reality of the lone prospector, whose treasure is not a quick score but a grueling physical ordeal. The film's famous climax, where the gold dust blows back into the desert from which it came, is a perfect metaphor for the entire history of the Sierra Madre's lost mines. The treasure is forever part of the landscape, tantalizingly real yet ultimately ungraspable, a mirage that drives men to madness because they know deep down that it actually exists. The dreams aren't based on nothing. They're based on the very real, documented history of men who found fortune and then, through violence, misfortune, or the sheer immensity of the wilderness, lost it all over again. But our next treasure emerges not from the dust of a desert canyon, but from the pristine depths of the South China Sea, a natural wonder so immense and so bizarre that its very existence seems to defy logic. This is the story of the lost pearl of Lao Tzu, also known as the Pearl of Allah, a gargantuan gem that blurs the line between miraculous discovery and elaborate hoax. Its tale begins in the clear waters off the island of Palawan in the Philippines in 1934. According to the most common account, a young Muslim diver was harvesting giant clams for a tribal chief when his hand became trapped in the powerful vise-like shell of a massive tridacna clam. Desperate to give him a proper Muslim burial, the chief ordered the clam hauled ashore, where it had to be pried open with crowbars. Inside, they did not find the diver's body, but something else entirely, a perfectly formed, astonishingly large pearl, weighing an almost incomprehensible 14 pounds and measuring over 9 inches long. Its surface was not the smooth, lustrous nacre of a typical pearl, but a more porcelain-like walled texture resembling a human brain or a turbaned head. The pearl eventually came into the possession of an American missionary and ethnologist named Wilburn Dowell Cobb. The story goes that in 1939, Cobb, who had been traveling through the region, saved the life of the tribal chief's son from malaria using modern medicine. Out of immense gratitude, the chief presented him with the extraordinary pearl. Cobb, stunned by the gift, became its fervent guardian and promoter. He named it the Pearl of Lao Tzu, weaving a fantastical legend around it. He claimed the pearl's history stretched back over 2,500 years, that it had been grown in a giant clam intentionally implanted with a carved amulet by the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu himself, and that it had been passed down through generations as a sacred talisman. While this elaborate backstory is almost certainly a romantic fabrication Cobb invented to boost the pearl's mystique and value, the physical object itself was very real, and its sheer size made it an instant sensation. Cobb brought the pearl to the United States, where it was exhibited at Ripley's Believe It or Not auditorium in New York City, captivating Depression-era audiences who queued to see the Pearl of Allah, a name Ripley's used to emphasize its exotic, otherworldly appearance. For decades, Cobb toured with it, treating it as a combination of a scientific curiosity and a cash cow. Its estimated value at the time ballooned into the millions of dollars, a figure based more on its uniqueness and the publicity than on any traditional gemological appraisal, as its baroque, non-nacreous form made it useless for jewelry. The pearl's future, however, would take a dramatic turn into the world of high-stakes finance and mystery. After Cobb's death in the late 1970s, the pearl was inherited by his estate. In the early 1980s, it was reportedly used as collateral for a $200,000 loan from a gemologist named Peter Hoffman and his business partners who planned to exhibit it. This is the moment the pearl effectively vanished from public view. What followed was a tangled web of lawsuits, ownership disputes, and unanswered questions that continues to this day. When Hoffman and his associates attempted to sell the pearl to pay back the loan, they found the market for a multi-million-dollar curio was smaller than they had hoped. A potential buyer from Bahrain reportedly offered a fraction of the asking price. The legal battles over its true ownership and the validity of the lien dragged on for years, consuming vast sums of money and ensuring the pearl remained locked away in a safety deposit box seen by almost no one. Then, in 2006, the story took another strange twist. A man named Victor Barbish claimed to own a 1/3 stake in the pearl. After his death, his family stated the pearl had been sold to settle his debts, but they refused to disclose the buyer or the sale price, citing a non-disclosure agreement. This secretive transaction plunged the pearl's whereabouts into deeper obscurity than ever before. The central mystery surrounding the Pearl of Lao Tzu is not just about its location, but its very nature. Is it even a real pearl? Most gemologists classify it as a non-nacreous pearl, meaning it lacks the iridescent mother-of-pearl coating that defines gems from oysters. It is instead composed of calcite formed in a giant clam. While it is a genuine biological creation, some experts have argued it is more accurately a pearl blister, a solid formation that grows attached to the shell, which was then broken off and polished. Its weight is also a subject of intense debate. Cobb claimed it weighed 14 pounds, but a later weighing in the 1980s put it at just over 6.4 kilograms, or about 14.1 pounds, seemingly confirming the incredible claim. Yet, skepticism persists. Could such a massive object form naturally? The largest documented pearls from oysters weigh only a few pounds, making this clam-produced behemoth a staggering outlier that challenges our understanding of conchology. Its current status is the ultimate question. Is it sitting in a private vault, its owner fully aware of its controversial history? Was it sold to an anonymous collector in the Middle East or Asia, as some rumors suggest? Or, in the most mundane and disappointing scenario, was its value so tied up in legal disputes and its impractical size that it was ultimately broken apart or discarded, its legend too cumbersome for anyone to handle? The Pearl of Lao Tzu remains a captivating enigma, a physical object that thousands of people have seen, yet one whose story is so shrouded in tall tales, lawsuits, and secrecy that it has achieved a mythical status. It represents the powerful human desire to believe in the existence of the ultimate natural wonder, and the often comical reality of greed and litigation that can surround even the most magnificent of treasures. From the bizarre natural wonder of a giant pearl, we turn now to a treasure of an entirely different nature, one not born of the sea, but forged in the heart of a nation's struggle for identity and survival. The royal casket of Poland was not a single chest of jewels, but a sacred repository of national memory. Created in the late 19th century, it was an ornate, large wooden chest, lined with crimson velvet and adorned with the white eagle of Poland. Its contents were beyond price, 73 meticulously curated relics connecting the Polish people to their sovereign past. Inside were personal items that had belonged to kings and national heroes, a silver locket containing a lock of hair from King Sigismund the Old, a golden snuff box that belonged to King Stanislaw August Poniatowski, the coronation glove of King Augustus II, and a silver rosary owned by the military commander and national icon Tadeusz Kościuszko. There were miniature portraits, medallions, and fragments of clothing, each piece a tangible thread linking a nation that had been erased from the map to the glory of its former independence. As the dark shadow of the Nazi invasion fell over Poland in 1939, the protectors of this priceless collection faced an impossible dilemma. The casket was housed in the royal castle in Warsaw, a certain target for looting by Hitler's forces, who were systematically plundering Polish cultural heritage. In a desperate act of preservation, a group of courageous curators and historians made the decision to hide the casket. They secretly transported it out of the capital and concealed it within the walls of a Catholic seminary in the town of Nowy Sącz in southern Poland. There it was bricked up behind a false wall, its location known only to a trusted few who swore to protect the secret with their lives. For the duration of the war, as Warsaw was systematically razed and countless other treasures were stolen or destroyed, the royal casket remained safe, a silent testament to a Poland that refused to die. The end of the war, however, did not bring liberation for the casket. Instead, it ushered in a new occupation. As Nazi forces retreated west, the Soviet Red Army advanced, claiming Polish territory as its own. The Soviet secret police, the NKVD, immediately began a campaign to seize anything of value and, more importantly, to dismantle any symbols that could fuel Polish nationalism and resistance to communist rule. The royal casket, a potent symbol of the old Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and its monarchical tradition, was a primary target. In early 1945, NKVD officers, almost certainly acting on a tip from a local informant, descended upon the seminary in Nowy Sącz. They tore down the masonry, discovered the hidden chamber, and confiscated the casket and its entire contents. They loaded it onto a truck and drove it away, and from that moment, the royal casket of Poland vanished into the impenetrable bureaucracy of the Soviet state. Its fate is one of the great, lingering cold cases of post-war Europe. The most probable and tragic theory is that the NKVD, viewing the relics not as historical artifacts but as propaganda tools for a vanquished enemy, simply destroyed them. The items may have been stripped of their precious metals and gems, with the sentimental objects burned or discarded in the immediate aftermath of their seizure. Another possibility is that the casket was shipped east to the Soviet Union, where it could have been stored in a secret NKVD or KGB warehouse, perhaps alongside other looted art and treasures from across Eastern Europe. If it survived this journey, it might have been later dispersed, its items catalogued anonymously into the vast holdings of a state museum, or even finding their way into the private collections of high-ranking Soviet officials. Despite numerous official inquiries from the Polish government since the fall of the Iron Curtain, Russian authorities have consistently denied any knowledge of the casket's whereabouts. The archives from that era of the NKVD remain largely closed to outside researchers, leaving a void of information filled only with speculation and hope. The loss is profoundly felt in Poland, a nation where history is the bedrock of identity. These were not just old objects, they were the physical anchors of a national narrative, the touchstones that made history real. The recovery of the royal casket would be more than a cultural victory. It would be the symbolic healing of a wound inflicted during one of the darkest chapters of the 20th century, a return of the very soul of a nation that was stolen away in the silence of a new oppression. After centuries of searching for lost fortunes on land, we now set our sights on the fury of the ocean, where one of history's most tantalizing maritime tragedies unfolded. A story of imperial ambition, staggering greed, and a storm that swallowed a kingdom's ransom in a single night. This is the fate of the Flor de la Mar, or Flower of the Sea, a Portuguese carrack that remains the undisputed holy grail of shipwrecked treasure. Built in Lisbon in 1502, this vessel was a leviathan of its age, a 400-ton behemoth with a towering forecastle and 3 immense masts. For nearly a decade, it served as the flagship for the legendary conqueror Afonso de Albuquerque, carrying him on his brutal campaigns to establish a Portuguese empire across the Indian Ocean. The ship itself was a veteran of these waters, but it was also notoriously unstable, having been patched up numerous times after running aground and suffering heavy damage. It was a floating relic worn down by years of service, yet it was chosen for the most important and most overloaded mission of its career. That mission followed the brutal sack of Malacca in 1511. Malacca, located on the Malay Peninsula, was the richest port in the entire spice trade, a vibrant, cosmopolitan crossroads where goods from all over Asia were bought and sold. For Albuquerque, its capture was the crowning achievement of his career. The plunder his men seized was beyond anything they could have imagined. The royal treasury of the Sultanate was emptied. They took chests overflowing with gold coins from a dozen different kingdoms, silver bars stacked like firewood, and uncut diamonds, rubies, and sapphires by the pound. There were intricate religious artifacts looted from temples, jeweled weapons, and silks woven with gold thread. Most valuable of all, however, was the spice. The ship's hold was filled to bursting with sacks of precious nutmeg, cloves, and cinnamon, which were worth more than their weight in gold on the European market. Contemporary chroniclers, their voices still ringing with awe, describe the Fleur de la Mar as being so ludicrously overloaded that its upper decks were practically level with the waterline, a dangerously top-heavy ship straining under the weight of an entire empire's wealth. Albuquerque's plan was to sail this floating treasure chest west across the Indian Ocean, around the tip of India, and back to the court of King Manuel I in Lisbon. The voyage would be a triumphant procession, a display of power and riches that would cement his legacy and fill the Portuguese crown's coffers for a generation. But the Indian Ocean in November is a treacherous place, governed by the violent and unpredictable winds of the monsoon. As the Fleur de la Mar and its smaller escort navigated the strait between Sumatra and Malaysia, the weather turned apocalyptic. A ferocious storm descended upon them, whipping the sea into a maelstrom of towering waves. The old, overburdened carrack was no match for the tempest. Its already precarious stability gave way. Around the night of November 20th, 1511, the ship was driven onto a reef near the coast of Sumatra. The wooden hull, battered by the waves and weighed down by its incredible cargo, splintered and broke in two. The carnage was absolute. Of the hundreds of souls on board, only a handful survived, clinging to wreckage and washing ashore. Afonso de Albuquerque himself was among the fortunate few, saved by his own strength and perhaps a measure of divine intervention, though the loss of his flagship and its priceless cargo was said to have haunted him for the rest of his life. But the treasure, the immense fortune that represented the fruits of his conquest, was gone. The heavy chests of gold and silver bullion acted as an anchor, pulling the shattered halves of the ship instantly to the seabed. The lighter spices and silks were scattered across the surface by the raging waves, creating a bizarre, fragrant slick on the water that lasted for days, a bitter mockery of the ruin below. In a matter of hours, the Fleur de la Mar and its billion-dollar cargo vanished beneath the waves, settling into the silty ocean floor where it would remain, perfectly preserved and utterly lost for centuries. This single event created what many experts consider to be the most valuable undiscovered shipwreck in the world. Modern estimates, based on the detailed accounts from Albuquerque's own clerks and the known value of the spice trade, place the treasure's worth in the billions, perhaps even the tens of billions of dollars. But its value is more than just financial. It is an unparalleled time capsule from the very dawn of European colonialism in Asia. The wreck would contain not just generic gold, but specifically minted coins from the Malaccan Sultanate, unique jewelry from Javan and Siamese courts, and artifacts from Chinese trading missions, offering a snapshot of a globalized world long before the term was ever coined. Finding it would be the archaeological discovery of a lifetime, the modern hunt for the Fleur de la Mar has been a saga in itself, marked by high-tech ambition, national pride, and bitter international disputes. The primary challenge is the search area itself. The Strait of Malacca is one of the busiest shipping lanes on the planet, a watery superhighway where centuries of silt, discarded anchors, and modern debris have created a nightmare for sonar and magnetometer surveys. Furthermore, the political waters are just as murky. The likely wreck site falls within the contested territorial waters of both Indonesia and Malaysia, meaning any recovery operation would require navigating a diplomatic minefield. Despite these challenges, the lure has been irresistible. The most famous seeker was the late Australian adventurer and treasure hunter Mike Hatcher, who launched a multi-million-dollar expedition in the 1990s. Using historical maps and advanced side-scan sonar, his team claimed to have found the wreck site, but they were unable to secure the necessary permits from the Indonesian government and were forced to abandon the search. Other expeditions have followed, each employing increasingly sophisticated technology, from remote-operated vehicles to multi-beam echo sounders that can create three-dimensional maps of the seafloor. Yet the Fleur de la Mar guards its secret. Some maritime historians now believe the wreck may be buried under centuries of sediment, making it invisible to traditional scanning equipment. Others speculate that strong currents may have scattered the debris field over a much wider area than previously thought. There is even a fringe theory, though widely dismissed, that local fishermen secretly salvaged parts of the wreck in the years following the disaster, though this would account for only the most accessible items on the surface and not the heavy bullion that sank straight down. The enduring mystery of the Fleur de la Mar is a powerful testament to the ocean's ability to keep its secrets. It represents the ultimate prize, a glittering, ghostly monument to the moment Portugal's golden age literally foundered on the rocks, leaving a dream of immeasurable wealth just out of reach, waiting for the day when technology and perseverance can finally overcome 500 years of silence. Yet, even as the legend of the Fleur de la Mar captures the imagination of deep-sea explorers, it is the impenetrable jungles of South America that hold perhaps the most enduring terrestrial treasure myth of all, the dream of a city built entirely of gold, a final, hidden bastion of an empire that refused to die. This is the legend of Paititi, the lost city that has become the New World's El Dorado, a place whispered about in conquistador diaries and indigenous oral histories for nearly 500 years. The story begins not with the Spanish but with the tragic fall of the Inca Empire itself. After the execution of the Emperor Atahualpa and the sacking of Cusco, the surviving Incas did not simply vanish. Under the leadership of a series of rebel emperors, they staged a remarkable retreat into the vast, cloud-forested mountains of Vilcabamba. From this remote redoubt, they waged a guerrilla war against the Spanish for another 36 years. But when the last Inca ruler, Tupac Amaru, was finally captured and executed in 1572, the Spanish believed the empire was truly finished. Yet the legend persisted that not all had been accounted for, that a faction of the royal family, along with the most devoted priests and generals, had taken the empire's most sacred objects and deepest treasures and fled even further, vanishing into the endless green sea of the Amazon to establish a new, pure kingdom, a place they called Paititi. The Spanish, intoxicated by the gold they had already plundered, became obsessed with finding this rumored last refuge. Their expeditions into the jungle were acts of breathtaking hubris and suffering. They followed cryptic maps drawn on deerskin and listened to stories from captured natives about a city where the temples were plated in gold and the gardens were adorned with life-sized gold statues of llamas and corn. One of the most compelling accounts comes from a missionary named Andrés Lopez, who in the late 16th century wrote of a large city rich in gold, silver, and jewels called Paititi, located in the middle of a tropical jungle near a large lake. Another persistent tale speaks of an Inca prince named Incari who, after beheading the Spanish king, would lead his people to a hidden city of unimaginable splendor. These stories were not just about wealth, they were about a lost world, a place where Inca culture survived untouched by European influence, preserving its gods, its traditions, and its glory. For the conquistadors, it was a prize. For the descendants of the Incas, it was a story of resilience, a promise that the spirit of their civilization had not been extinguished. The search for Paititi has consumed explorers for centuries, leading them into some of the most dangerous and inaccessible terrain on the planet. The possible locations are as varied as the theories themselves. Some researchers believe it lies in the Monu National Park in Peru, a UNESCO biosphere reserve so pristine and remote that uncontacted tribes still live within its borders. Others argue for the tangled valleys of the Panteacola Mountains, a region of strange plateaus and deep canyons. A compelling theory, championed by explorers like Lars Hafskjold, suggests the city is not in Peru at all, but across the border in Bolivia's Madidi National Park, an area of similar isolation and mystery. The challenges are immense. The search involves navigating treacherous rivers filled with caimans and piranhas, hacking through vine-choked rainforest where visibility is measured in feet, and dealing with venomous snakes, disease-carrying insects, and the very real risk of getting hopelessly lost. This is a landscape that does not give up its secrets easily. The modern quest for Paititi has been utterly transformed by technology, moving beyond the machete and the hand-drawn map. The most revolutionary tool is LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. This technology involves mounting a laser scanner on an aircraft and flying over the forest canopy. The lasers can penetrate the thick leaves and vegetation, bouncing off the solid ground below and returning to the sensor. By measuring the time it takes for each laser pulse to return, a highly detailed three-dimensional map of the terrain beneath the trees can be created, revealing human-made structures like plazas, roads, and pyramids that are completely invisible from the ground. In recent years, LiDAR surveys in Guatemala and Mexico have revolutionized our understanding of the Maya, revealing vast, previously unknown megacities. This same technology is now being applied to the search for Paititi, scanning the most promising areas of the Peruvian and Bolivian Amazon from the air, looking for the telltale geometric shapes of a lost civilization hidden beneath the green veil. And the results are already beginning to rewrite history. Expeditions to sites like the newly discovered settlement at Huata, meaning island in Quechua, high in the Peruvian Andes, have used LiDAR to reveal a complex urban center with circular buildings, terraces, and a network of roads, all suggesting a significant Inca presence far from their known heartland. While Huata may not be the golden city of Paititi itself, its discovery proves that major Inca settlements remain hidden, waiting to be found. Each new anomaly on a LiDAR map is a potential clue, a step closer to the ultimate prize. The search is no longer just a romantic adventure. It is a serious archaeological endeavor, a race between researchers who seek to understand and protect these sites and looters who seek only to plunder them for gold. The legend of Paititi endures because it represents more than just treasure. It is the dream of finding a last, untouched piece of the Inca world, a city that holds not just gold, but the final, unanswered questions of a magnificent and tragic civilization. And so we arrive at our final treasure, a mystery that has captivated, bankrupted, and even claimed the lives of those who dared to solve it. This story doesn't begin in an ancient desert or a royal palace, but on a small, unassuming island off the coast of Nova Scotia, where a simple depression in the ground would launch one of the longest and most expensive treasure hunts in history. In 1795, a young man named Daniel Magines discovered a peculiar circular clearing on Oak Island. At its center was a single, old oak tree with a branch that appeared to have been cut to support a pulley or a rope. Directly beneath this branch was a distinct man-made depression in the soil. Remembering local tales of pirates in the area, Magines and two friends, John Smith and Anthony Vaughan, began to dig, convinced they had found the entrance to a pirate vault. What they uncovered in those first few feet would ignite a mystery that burns to this day. They quickly hit a layer of flagstones not native to the island. A few feet further down, they encountered a platform of sturdy oak logs securely set into the walls of the shaft. This was no natural sinkhole, it was a constructed pit, and they were just getting started. As they continued their grueling work by hand, the structure of the shaft revealed an astonishing and terrifying complexity. Every 10 feet, they would hit another solid oak platform, each one sealed with a putty-like substance and layers of a fibrous coconut husk, a material not found anywhere in Canada. The pit seemed to descend in a perfect 10-foot intervals, a meticulously engineered chimney leading deep into the earth. The sheer amount of labor involved was staggering, suggesting a project of immense importance, far beyond the capabilities of a few pirates working in secret. The real turning point came when the original discoverers, now joined by the Onslow Company, reached the 90-foot level. Their auger, a large drilling tool, bored through another oak platform and then dropped into a hollow space below. When they pulled the drill back up, the sample it brought to the surface sent a jolt of pure electricity through the group. twisted around the auger were 3 loose links of a chain made of gold. They had seemingly struck a buried treasure chest. Driven by this proof, they drilled even further, and at around the 98-foot level, their drill hit a solid, impenetrable obstacle. It wasn't rock or wood, it struck metal, producing a distinct scraping sound. Many believed they had hit an iron chest, perhaps even multiple chests filled with unimaginable wealth. The decision was made to widen the shaft to recover the treasure, but as they worked, disaster struck. The following day, the entire bottom of the pit had flooded with seawater, rising to within 30 feet of the surface. Every attempt to bail it out proved futile as the water level would not drop. The builders of this pit had installed a brilliant and diabolical booby trap. This flood tunnel was the pit's masterstroke, a hidden engineering marvel designed to protect its secret until the very end. Later excavations would reveal a 500-foot-long stone-lined channel, cleverly dug on a gentle slope from a nearby beach known as Smith's Cove directly into the money pit. This artificial conduit was designed to flood the entire shaft the moment treasure seekers broke through the final barrier. It was a permanent, self-resetting trap, making retrieval virtually impossible with 18th or even 19th century technology. The mystery deepened in the mid-19th century when another company, the Truro Company, made a bizarre discovery while investigating the flood system at Smith's Cove. As they dug around the beach, they uncovered a mysterious stone tablet, roughly 2 feet long and 1 foot wide, covered in a cryptic cipher. When the symbols were later deciphered, they spelled out a tantalizing and some say taunting message: 40 feet below, £2 million are buried. This stone seemed to confirm the treasure's existence and its immense value, but it too would later vanish, adding another layer of obfuscation to the already impenetrable puzzle. The 20th century saw the hunt escalate from a curious pastime to a massive, technologically advanced industrial operation. Fortunes were spent and lost. The Franklin Roosevelt family was involved in a syndicate in the early 1900s. Later, men like George Green used massive 70-inch caissons and powerful pumps in the 1960s, only to be thwarted again. The most famous modern seeker is undoubtedly Dan Blankenship, who partnered with a young Rick Lagina in the 2000s, a partnership that spawned the History Channel's long-running series The Curse of Oak Island. Their efforts, backed by millions of dollars and the latest technology, have unearthed a bizarre collection of artifacts that point to a profound historical presence, yet the core treasure remains elusive. They have pulled a medieval-style lead cross from a beach, a Spanish copper coin dating to the 1600s, and human bones carbon dated to the mid-1700s from a deep borehole. They found traces of gold and silver in soil samples and even uncovered a mysterious hand-wrought iron spike in the depths of the original money pit area. Each find is a piece of a mosaic that refuses to form a clear picture. This scattering of clues from different eras and cultures is precisely what fuels the wildest and most compelling theories about the pit's true purpose. The classic pirate theory points to Captain William Kidd or Edward Teach, Blackbeard himself, but the pit's sophistication seems far beyond the scope of any pirate crew. Another popular idea suggests it is the resting place of the lost treasure of the Knights Templar, perhaps even the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant, smuggled out of Europe after the Order's suppression and hidden in the New World. Others propose it was a secret vault for French royal jewels during the Revolution, or even the hidden manuscripts of Francis Bacon, proving he was the true author of Shakespeare's plays. The most grounded, yet still fantastic, theory posits that it was a brilliantly engineered natural distillation chamber built by the British Navy to safely produce fresh water from seawater for long voyages, though this fails to explain the gold links and the cryptic stone. The truth is, the evidence points in a dozen different directions at once, supporting every theory and debunking none. Despite the immense effort, the island continues to guard its ultimate secret with a ruthless efficiency that has led many to speak of a literal curse. It is often called the money pit for its uncanny ability to consume vast fortunes without ever yielding a return. More tragically, it has earned the nickname the Curse of Oak Island, as 6 men have lost their lives in the pursuit of its treasure, adding a somber weight to the endeavor. Modern excavations have revealed that the original money pit is likely a natural sinkhole or a complex karst feature that was then modified and enhanced by someone long ago. The flooding is not just from one tunnel, but from a network of natural and man-made waterways, a hydrological nightmare that has defeated every pumping system thrown at it. The original chests, if they were ever there, may have long since collapsed into a deeper cavity or been dissolved by the acidic groundwater. After over 2 centuries of digging, drilling, and dreaming, the greatest treasure found on Oak Island may not be gold or jewels, but the enduring mystery itself. It stands as a permanent monument to human curiosity and perseverance, a riddle carved into the earth that continues to ask the same tantalizing question. If there was never anything there, why does the evidence insist that there was? And so our journey through these 25 legends comes to an end, a trail that has led us from sacred temples and sunken galleons to cursed gold and stolen masterpieces. What stands out most profoundly is not just the immense value of what was lost, but the incredible diversity of these treasures and the powerful human stories intertwined with each one. We have encountered objects of divine significance like the Ark of the Covenant, monuments to knowledge like the Library of Alexandria, and masterpieces of art like the Honjō Masamune. We've followed the cold, hard clues of the Copper Scroll and gotten lost in the mythical curse of the Nibelung Gold. Each story, whether grounded in meticulous documentation or born from centuries of oral tradition, offers a unique window into the values, ambitions, and fears of the people who spoke of them. They are not merely tales of wealth, they are reflections of our deepest desires for connection, understanding, and a tangible link to what came before us. These narratives, in all their varied forms, reveal a universal and enduring human fascination. They speak to our innate curiosity, that driving need to solve a puzzle and uncover what is hidden. They tap into our sense of wonder, the childlike thrill of imagining a city of gold or a vault buried on a remote island. And on a deeper level, they connect us to the past in a way that textbooks simply cannot. The lost treasure is a vessel carrying within it the political intrigue of a French Revolution, the spiritual devotion of an Inca priest, the artistic genius of a master swordsmith, and the brutal calculus of a conquistador. To follow these stories is to take a masterclass in history, archaeology, and human psychology, all woven into a single, captivating mystery. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of this entire exploration is the undeniable fact that the hunt itself is often more valuable than the prize could ever be. The quest for these treasures has driven innovation, from the sonar technology used to scan ocean floors to the LiDAR that reveals lost cities beneath jungle canopies. It has built communities of passionate researchers, historians, and amateur sleuths, all united by a shared curiosity. These legends inspire us to look closer at an old map, to reread an ancient text with fresh eyes, and to wonder about the secrets our own landscape might hold. They remind us that our world is still filled with mystery, that history is not a closed book but a living story with missing chapters we might yet find. The true treasure is the perpetual sense of possibility, the thrilling idea that the next great discovery could be just around the corner, waiting for someone with the right combination of knowledge, perseverance, and luck to finally bring it into the light. This is where the conversation turns to you. Every single one of these legends has its own devoted followers and compelling arguments. Which of these 25 lost treasures captured your imagination most completely? Was it the spiritual weight of the menorah from the Second Temple, or the sheer, audacious value of the fleur de la mar lying on the ocean floor? Does the artistic tragedy of the Amber Room resonate with you, or does the historical significance of Genghis Khan's hidden tomb fire up your curiosity? Perhaps you're drawn to the unsolved crime of the Irish crown jewels or the cryptic puzzle of Oak Island. Let us know down in the comments which treasure you would choose to pursue if you had the chance and why its story speaks to you. The greatest thing about these mysteries is that they are meant to be shared, discussed, and debated, keeping the spirit of the hunt alive for generations to come.